All right, what's good? It's drive time on a Thursday afternoon, about 10 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is snowy. It is cold. According to the forecast, the snow will let up in about 1 hour from right now, but our resorts are getting stomped, and we are getting stomped down here in the valley in the benches, which is, of course, good for the folks that enjoy such things. But as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. My name is Spence Checketts. I host this radio program. That young man is Porter Larson. He produces it. Does a lot of other things for it, too. Not just a producer. He books the guests and sometimes comes in with hot takes off the top rope. Maybe we'll get some hot takes from Porter today on a jam-packed Thursday show. The Utah Jazz will begin the second half of the NBA season, taking on Oklahoma City coming up tomorrow. But the NBA is back kind of in full force. Utah Hockey Club will be back in action on Saturday, but of course the hockey world is focused on the Four Nations final tonight. We will talk about that game. It is in Boston, a great domestic hockey city without the hockey history that Montreal has, but the diehard hockey fans out in full force will have the Four Nations final matchup for you here on this radio station after the Craig Smith Coaches Show tonight, which will be in at 6 o'clock. So a lot of eyes, a lot of ears, a lot of attention on the world of pro hockey tonight. So we'll get you ready for that game. We'll talk about that game on the program, and then you can hear it on this little old radio station. RSL, CONCACAF Champions Cup, 0-0, your final down in Costa Rica. They'll be back in action, this time for MLS play against San Jose on the road on Saturday. San Jose has a new player, a new striker. His name is Chicho Arango. Played here last year. So RSL will have to deal with Chicho on the other side coming up on Saturday. And then back in action, leg 2 of the CONCACAF Champions Cup coming up next week here in Salt Lake. The home opener for RSL is against Seattle a week from Saturday. So a little soccer on the program today. Kind of a quiet time right now in the world of pro football. A trend is taking place in the world of college football I want to talk about today, as Texas and USC have announced that they are the latest programs to cancel their spring games. Is that something that we're going to see kind of widespread across the world of college football? I believe that the answer to that is yes. Steve Sarkisian got a new contract today. He will be paid very handsomely after a great stretch last year in college football. We will give you the latest with the conference commissioners meeting, namely Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, because it was only the SEC and the Big Ten. No Big 12 rep, no ACC rep, no Group of 5 rep. A lot of rumors and some things that we actually do know tangibly coming out of that meeting. So, of course, as the home of the Utes and a college football market, we have one eye on college football all the time. The Utah State Aggies absolutely curb stomped San Jose State last night. Utah State in the middle of a really nice college basketball run. Do some college basketball on the show today. Have a great college basketball guest as we are high speed ahead to March. And so busy on a Thursday with a good guest list for you guys, starting out with Andy Larson. Covers the Utah Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune. Do some Jazz. We'll do some NBA hoops. We'll do some maybe a little RSL if time allows with that guy Andy Larson today. Ken Pomeroy. I had a nephew last year ask me, what is a Ken Pom? Because he was watching college basketball coverage. And if you watch any college basketball coverage, anyone in the know will reference the work of Ken Pomeroy, and his website is kenpom.com. So if you're watching SportsCenter or a college basketball show and you hear them say, well, they're 31st in the Ken Pom, which is what BYU is right now, that's because of the work of our guy, Ken Pomeroy, one of the most respected college basketball minds out there. We're going to bring Ken in today to talk some Utah hoops, to talk some BYU hoops, Utah State Aggies as well, and then big picture college basketball with Ken Pomeroy on the program. Amin El Hassan makes his triumphant return to the show for your NBA Daily Assist today. Amin is a guy I've known for a long time. He was in the Knicks front office, the Suns front office. He's been in media now for about 15 years. Has a number of different podcasts, does a bunch of work with the Lebatard group down in South Beach there. So we'll bring Amin on today. Then we'll do a little sports court with our guys from the law firm of Handy and Handy. So a busy show on a Thursday afternoon. Andy Larson, Ken Pomeroy, Amin El Hassan, little sports court today. We'll say goodnight in time for the Craig Smith Coaches Show coming up at 6 o'clock tonight. And then at 7 o'clock tonight, you'll hear the remainder of the Four Nations final matchup between Canada and the U.S. Andy Larson, Ken Pomeroy, Amino Hassan, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Thursday afternoon.
What up?
Do you have a Four Nations final hot take right out of the gates?
I don't think so. I don't think I pay enough attention to Canada or USA hockey to give you an actual hot take. Here's one. There are going to be 2 breaks during the game that are going to go too long. I'm going to get sidetracked, and then I'm going to forget it's happening, but I'm going to dial in for the end of it. Hopefully Team USA pulls it out. That
is not a hot take. That is a prediction that will absolutely happen.
Listen, and I know I'm going to have to get used to it. We've got hockey in the market now. It is still the one thing. I know it's a me problem. I know it's an ADHD problem, but it's almost like the All-Star game we saw on Sunday, minus the bad basketball. Every game where you take those breaks, and for someone like me, man, you forget you're watching hockey. Not tonight, though. Not tonight.
Yeah, no, I understand. My entire thing with any sport I watch is it has to be on the DVR. And so I turn off all my alerts, okay, and I let the game kind of run.
That helps with hockey.
Yeah, and it helps with everything. I can get through an NBA game in like an hour, get through an NFL game in like an hour and a half, or college football. Unless I'm attending a game, I do not watch it live at home. I am on the DVR because I cannot stand the breaks and the commercials are. It'd be one thing if the commercials are entertaining. They're not. They're just boring and they're too long.
Well, and part of me feels a little guilty for it. What if I was in 1960 when I couldn't fast forward through a baseball game? Well, in 1960, they sat down and watched a baseball game and didn't have an hour of commercials during it, right? So I don't know. We're adjusting here.
Well, in 1960, we didn't have 75 different things to take our attention away from whatever else we're watching at every single moment.
Fair.
Oh, it's a commercial. Twitter, Instagram, social media. Oh, it's a commercial. Email. I'm going to flip over and watch Severance for a minute because
Promo
I
code.
missed it. Exactly. It's ridiculous, man. We are a society that has an attention span issue, and I'm not judging because I'm one of them. But we try to stay focused on this show for you guys 4 hours every afternoon.
Except I just messed all that up.
Yeah, you did. Thanks a lot, pal. All right, Andy Larson, our first guest right out of the gates. But before we get to Andy, on a Thursday, courtesy of our good friends at Burt Brothers, it is time now for your opening tip. All right, with over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. It's a one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. All right. We are a young hockey market. We are a market that is learning to embrace this new sport. We certainly have a lot of hockey fans that have lived here for a long time because hockey is not new to this market. Shout out to the Golden Eagles, Salt Palace way back in the day, obviously the Grizzlies. A lot of people here have watched hockey for a long time. NHL hockey is what's new here, and it's been a lot of fun. I think it's still a remarkable accomplishment that the Smith Entertainment Group pulled off with just basically weeks of notice. You know, we had Gary Bettman on our show prior to the announcement of the club actually coming here. Gary stopped by, the commissioner of the NHL, and he dropped on us the tidbit that the first conversation he had with Ryan about this whole thing was in March. And they were able to pull it off by May. I mean, it was wild. And while the learning curve certainly has been a little bit uncomfortable at times, and that building is not built for hockey yet, it's a really fun thing and a really cool experience for me as a media member to be able to cover this sport that I've watched since I was a kid and been around growing up in the Northeast, which is kind of like the hockey footprint domestically. It's been fun. And the Utah Hockey Club, I think, has a lot of exciting things ahead of it. It's a very young team. It's a front office that's savvy and smart. It's an ownership group that has shown they're willing to spend, and they have draft capital, and they have cap flexibility. In a way, it's kind of a lot like the Jazz. I would say the hockey club, the Utah Hockey Club, is further along in their rebuild than the Utah Jazz. But in fairness, they've been doing it this is like year 5 of Bill Armstrong's kind of project. And he's been very clear to let everybody know, temper those expectations because we got a young group, and they expedited it with a couple of different signings with some vets. Sergachev, namely Mikhail Sergachev, brought in, who is a Stanley Cup winner. He's still a young player, but a really good locker room guy that has shown he has a chance to be one of the leaders of this group for a long, long time. So the world of hockey right now is receiving attention that a lot of people feel like is very unprecedented. And I think it's really interesting because U.S.-Canada in hockey is not a new thing. And U.S.-Canada playing for, big-time championships and medals, that's not a new thing. We had the U.S.-Canada gold medal game here in 2002 for the Salt Lake Olympic Games. I remember I was working as one of the venue managers for the Salt Lake Ice Center. We had short track speed skating, which is, of course, Apollo Antonono's sport, who was kind of the biggest star of those games. We had figure skating in our venue, of course, the Russian judge scandal that rocked the world. But the ability and the chance to go see USA-Canada in hockey in the gold medal game was one of the most exciting things I've ever experienced. And you can already feel that tonight is something substantial. Now, I don't know. I've listened all morning to a couple of different hockey podcasts. We had Neil Smith on yesterday as the Four Nations Face-Off Final is tonight. Reminder, you can hear it on ESPN 700 following the Craig Smith Coaches Show. And topically, it's reminded me a little bit of the way that people talk about soccer when the U.S. actually has a decent team, or U.S.-Mexico, which is the rivalry that our U.S. men's national team has that's more intense than any other. Whenever there's like a big-time seminal soccer event, the World Cup back in the day, I think it was 94, was in the United States, which kind of led to the implementation of Major League Soccer, which just turned 30, or is turning 30 this year. The World Cup cycle, which is in our region coming up not too long from now. Everybody's talking about this as the seminal moment for soccer, and what does it mean for soccer moving forward? I don't know what the Four Nations Face-Off means for hockey moving forward, but I think it's interesting to listen to people break this down. And PK Subban, who's been on the coverage for ESPN, he's live in Boston, took an opportunity this morning to really take the NBA to task and utilize pro hockey as kind of a template for you as the consumer. If you actually want to watch a game and you actually want to watch a sport where the players give a rip about their craft, you cannot find it more intensely than you will find it in the world of professional hockey. And the great thing about a matchup like tonight is you have players playing for the flag and the country and not necessarily a paycheck or their brands. It's one of the things that still makes the Olympics great, right? Whenever an Olympic cycle takes place, whether it's winter games, summer games, it's fun to watch people who clearly are playing and performing for the flag that they're representing, as opposed to, just trying to make another buck or trying to get more followers or influence on your social media channels. And if we're honest, that's what pro basketball has become. And so, we'll see if this talking point, this selling point that everybody who's excited for the Four Nations Face-Off Final tonight actually comes to fruition. If there are any NBA fans out there that are disenfranchised by a product that employs employees that don't take their job seriously, watch what happens tonight. I mean, hockey players play through injuries. They play, like the Tkachuk brothers were both interviewed after the news came down that they had some upper body injury issues. And they both were like, well, yeah, we're hurt, but we're still playing. Coming up on Thursday, we wouldn't miss this. And I do think there is an absolute lesson that the NBA could take from the NHL when it comes to commitment to your craft, understanding why you do what you do. You do what you do for the people who support you, namely the consumers who buy tickets and the consumers who watch your games. Hockey players take that seriously, and they always have. And my experience with them is they are, for the most part, tremendous human beings that are good members of the community and care about what they do and want to do what they do at the highest of levels for the people that are tuning in. And I think it makes tonight really, really interesting and really exciting. Boston is a great hockey city domestically. We don't have the history of hockey that Canada has. Canada is the winningest hockey country there is. I do think they'll expand the Four Nations moving forward now that they've seen how awesome this is. I think Germany's going to be involved. Russia on paper should be involved, but hey, we'll leave that to the side. You guys understand why Russia has not been invited and probably won't be for a little while. But this should be a fun one tonight. So Connor Hellebuck is thought to be the best goalie in the world right now. He's the U.S. goalie, and he'll be between the pipes. Both of these teams have great goalies. Now, Jordan Binnington He's a bit of a polarizing guy. And I wouldn't be stunned, by the way, if the two goalies fight each other tonight. I don't think we're going to see like 3 fights right off the jump, like before we're even seeing any skating. Because when it comes to like a Stanley Cup final or a final like this, where a trophy is on the line and it's best versus best, your best players cannot spend time in the penalty box. That's why you don't see a ton of fighting when there's actually something on the line tangible to play for. So I'd be surprised if either the Tkachuk brothers drop their gloves. They need to be on the ice. But Jordan Binnington was the goalie for the St. Louis Blues in 2019. And that year, he went into Boston and led the Blues to a Game 7 win and a Stanley Cup. So Jordan Binnington knows what that crowd is like tonight. I'll be anxious to see what the crowd looks like as far as the split between Canada fans and U.S. fans. The ticket prices have absolutely skyrocketed as a result of the attention that this tournament has received. Now, according to Vivid Seats, the average listed price for the Four Nations Face-Off Championship game has skyrocketed by 137% since the U.S. and Canada first faced off on Saturday the 15th, jumping from $990. This is your average ticket price. That's what it was on the 15th. As of today, your average ticket price is $2,450. There are rumors that very good NHL players have inquired about getting tickets, and they've been turned away. So it will be a sellout. It will be loud. It will be intense. If you've never watched hockey tonight, I would tune in and watch this game. And if you're driving around town running errands, make sure to keep it here so you can hear it. The intensity in hockey games like this, I've said this earlier in the season when I was interviewing Neil. There's something about like hockey documentaries. There are a lot of great ones about like enforcers. The Avalanche Red Wings documentary that's out on ESPN 30 for 30 is a phenomenal watch. There's a different level of intensity with hockey that I think, honestly speaking, is unmatched on stages like this. And you'll feel it when you tune in tonight. So it's at 6 o'clock. We'll join that coverage while it's going on at 7 o'clock after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. So really pumped for this one. Four Nations final tonight, Canada and the U.S. All right, coming up on the other side, we'll catch up with our buddy from the Salt Lake Tribune. His name is Andy Larson. All right, the Utah Jazz are in action tomorrow. OKC is the opponent. The second half of the NBA season kind of got going last night. Lakers have lost now, excuse me, to the Jazz and the Hornets. Back-to-back games with Luka and LeBron. Our next guest covers the Jazz and other things for the Salt Lake Tribune. On a Thursday afternoon, we welcome in Andy Larson. Andy, happy Thursday, buddy. How we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. How was Beer Bar last night? Most important question, the RSL CONCACAF Champions Cup watch party. Vibes immaculate, as the kids say?
The vibes are good. Look, it was not a strongly attended watch party. There were probably, 10, 15 RSL fans there. But to watch a 0-0 draw and where nothing happened. And so I would say the vibes were probably pretty mid, let's be honest.
Mid vibes at Beer Bar? Wow. Don't tell Ramondo.
Look, Beer Bar had nothing to do with this. It's a great location to watch a game. But, yeah, 0-0 with it was not the peak of watch parties like you and I have been to, for example.
Fair enough. So, after that performance, have you changed your expectations for better or for worse for this club this year?
I guess a little bit worse. Look, Costa Rican teams aren't very good. And ideally, you would be promoting more ideas and having better chances than I think RSL had during that match. And I watched the Cincinnati Motagua match after that. That's a Honduran club, and Cincinnati bossed that game to a degree that RSL didn't. Now, didn't have Diego Luna, didn't have Justin Glad for most of that game, but the biggest thing is they didn't have a striker, and then unfortunately Diogo Gonçalves looked as average as he's been since RSL acquired him. And so I think that in particular, that last note, that Diogo doesn't look like a special player even in year two as we start year two, and maybe we'll see how this develops. It's game one for sure, but it was, as I put it on Twitter, kind of mildly disheartening.
Last RSL question. I am told that reinforcements should be expected. I don't know when. I don't know what it looks like. What do you hope it looks like, and when do you hope it comes down?
Yeah, look, it's got to be a striker. And if Elias Manuel didn't want to come to RSL, again, it's disappointing that a replacement hasn't been found more quickly, given that now you are playing in Champions League play, Champions Cup play, I guess. It's disappointing, frankly, that they didn't sign a bigger player after they knew that Chicho was going to be moving on. Pretty clearly midway through the season, they had knew what that situation was and knew that maybe that wasn't going to be tenable moving forward. So, look, it's got to be a striker. It's got to be a good striker. It's got to be a designated player striker in my mind, or at least someone who's got significant history of scoring goals in this league. There have been the Duncan Maguire rumors, and maybe that's the way they go. And I think Duncan's a very good player and would solve a lot of those problems. I don't know about it at the DP level, but and in the end, this team needs more up front to be one of the best teams in the Western Conference, like I hope they will be.
All right, All-Star Weekend. Andy, goodness gracious. What was your interest/consumption level and your takeaways?
Yeah, honestly, pretty low. I tried to take some time off, but it also just seemed like the exact opposite of must-watch television, right? Like, even in the sports world, and I love watching sports. Like, why is an average sports fan watching the NBA All-Star Game with its tournament and all of its Kevin Hart skits and giving awards to Charles Barkley and the Inside the NBA TNT crew when that show is still going to continue next year just on ESPN? No one cares what channel this is on. To turn 30 minutes of basketball into a 3-hour presentation is rough. And so, yeah, like the Daytona 500, frankly, may have been more interesting to watch. For me, I had dinner with my family and did not feel like I was missing a whole lot of what was happening on All-Star Sunday. I think Mac McClung does some cool dunks on All-Star Saturday, and Stephon Castle did as well. And that was, I think, a relatively above-average dunk contest. But, yeah, it's just not must-watch anymore. And I think, that's a problem that all of these leagues are facing, is that, like, the traditional All-Star game format doesn't work anymore. And ultimately, I think kind of the further you get away from that traditional kind of idea, whether that be, what the NFL has done with the Pro Bowl or what the NHL has done with the Four Nations tournament, it's probably the best way to go at this point.
So, are you old enough to remember when the All-Star game was fun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember it being a big part of growing up, being like 8, 9, 10 years old and watching the All-Star game. And it seemed really fun and cool then, right? Like, it seemed like these superheroes in my brain, and some of that's just because I was a kid, but were coming together and playing in this game, that had everyone I'd ever heard of in it, right? So, it was better. Look, and it wasn't amazing. It's not like they were killing each other out there, but it was significantly more real than what we've seen over the last 5 and 10 years.
Do you have any ideas to make it, consumable? Because ultimately, I understand your point about other leagues and dealing with their all-star stuff, but the Pro Bowl was never good. Like, the Pro Bowl was never good, and the NBA All-Star Game for like 30 years was the best pickup basketball game that you could find in the world because the best players showed up and played high-level basketball. So whenever anyone asks me, like, what's your preferred format? My preferred format is the All-Star Game with players who give a rip. That's my preferred format. But I don't think that we're ever getting back there. Is there a format, idea, whatever it is that you've heard that you think makes this thing redeemable, or is it just time to eat our crow and understand that this is not anything that's ever going to be exciting ever again?
I haven't heard of one that I think makes a real difference. They've tried so many things, right? Like, the one that gets me is that they, literally gave, I think it was $500,000 to the winner of the game to charity. And in fact, in Cleveland, they brought kids who were food insecure, who were actually needed food from the food bank, sat them in a, lower bowl, very obvious section, a group of 20, 30 kids. I don't know what the actual number was, and said, we will give the food bank $500,000 if you win this game. And the game still sucks. Like, I don't know what you do with that level of player, disassociation from it being a quality product. And like, you can kind of play around the edges with the Elam ending and the tournament and, make it look worse so that, hey, in some of these games you're playing rising stars players and maybe they're trying to establish their name and so play a little bit harder. But like, in the end, the rising stars didn't play that hard either, right? Like, it's not like they were really defending. They just want to be cool. And when you have the incentives that the NBA currently does, where most of the All-Stars are making between $30 and $60 million a year, paying them each $1 million if they win also doesn't really cut it. I think we've seen that with the play-in tournament. And, home court advantage in the NBA Finals, let's say, I don't think really cuts it because we see teams tank out of those positions year after year, or just not, maybe not tank, but load manage out of those positions year after year because they think, hey, being the third seed or the fourth seed in the playoffs is fine compared to being the first seed. It just doesn't matter that much who hosts that game 7 at the end of the series. So I'm fresh out of ideas. I haven't heard anything that's that interesting to me. And ultimately, I think that just like the incentives of the league, that the league is too big right now for these guys to care about this because they are already stars and just don't have that much to gain from trying really hard in the All-Star game.
So PK Subban, the Four Nations final is tonight. Canada taking on the U.S. It's on our station after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. He went on a couple of different platforms today on ESPN. He was doing the rounds, and he just eviscerated NBA players. And he utilized his platform as an opportunity to express to consumers, if you are interested in watching a sport, if you are interested in watching a game where the league employs people that actually care about their craft, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, you should watch hockey because hockey players play through injuries. They play for the flag tonight and for their club as opposed to simply individual glory. And it's pretty unanimous, man. Like, it's pretty much across the board, whether you're talking about Connor McDavid or one of the local guys here, Dylan Gunther. I mean, it is a different brand of athlete. It's a different brand of care. Do you think that's something that people in the NBA could maybe learn a thing or two from as far as the commitment to their craft that hockey players have? Or is this just a cultural, societal thing that it is what it is? And if you're covering pro basketball, you just have to deal with what this thing has become, which is a product oftentimes played by players that don't seem to give that much of a rip.
I mean, I think it's a mix of both. And I think, like, the NBA players not caring generally is kind of overstated. Like, Kevin Durant, did you watch that Court of Gold documentary?
I did. It was awesome. It was awesome, yeah.
Kevin Durant cried about the idea of playing in the Olympics, right? Like, and in that documentary, and it clearly meant a ton to him, right? And, like, KD is not someone who I think is like an outlier in terms of caring about the game. Like, I thought it was really clear that the Olympics really mattered to those players to a huge degree. And so I think, like, the Four Nations tournament being a success on the NHL level is reflective of kind of those same things that we did actually see from NBA players in the Olympics, right? And I think we could see in kind of a tournament similar to Four Nations in the NBA. I also think that you're right that, like, clearly there's a pride in playing through injury that hockey players have that NBA players don't. I would also say that, like, frankly, that happens more on the team side, and I put more blame on the team putting out the injury report than the players. I mean, look, I've been in these Jazz locker rooms or on, in Jazz shoot-arounds, whatever, all year long, and watch as kind of the training staff and these team representatives come up to players and essentially say, hey, how serious is this injury? Hey, maybe we should take this one, be cautious about this. Maybe you should sit these next couple of games out. Like, while the players have those conversations and are not happy about them, right? Like, would prefer to be playing those games. I mean, like, John Collins is sitting, had sat in the last few weeks with a fake injury, would rather be playing out there. Lauri Markkanen would rather be playing. And it's just the team that is preventing them from doing so. And I think that, to me, is like, okay, you need to change the incentives of the sport a little bit, where in hockey, for whatever reason, those 7-game series are not foregone conclusions, even when it's a 1 seed versus an 8 seed. I mean, we've seen 8 seeds make tremendous runs through the NHL playoffs in a way that we just have not seen NBA 8 seeds make those runs generally, with a couple of exceptions. It feels like upsets are much more common in the NHL. And it, again, those games seem to individually matter. But, like, I do think that we maybe overstate, and maybe PK Subban overstates a little bit, like, the players' side of everything that's not the All-Star game. I will absolutely blame the All-Star game on the players 100%. I don't necessarily blame a whole lot of what we see in the NBA on the players exclusively, because I know how much the teams are involved in not getting the best product every night.
Yeah, and I think PK was probably utilizing the moment to make a larger point to get more people to tune into hockey. And a lot of it was performative, but I think a lot of points that were made are very fair. And you're not wrong, ultimately, to bring in the dynamic of not just teams, but the league. And I always bring up agents behind the scenes wanting their clients to get to that second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth contract if you're Chris Paul, to make generational wealth. I get the game, but has the league simply become, Andy, a Fortune 500 company that is only caring about creating value for their shareholders? Like, it feels like the league is run like and it's always been a business. David Stern was a hardcore businessman, but David actually got the media game and the consumer game a little bit differently than this this office under Adam Silver seems to get. Is it just now that this league is simply about creating as much value for their shareholders as possible, and it's just being run like a tech company?
Frankly, yes, I'd agree with all of that. And I think the kind of too big to fail idea does apply to the NBA a little bit right now, where, despite the TV ratings being what they are, kind of mid, whatever, the TV deal is tripling over in the next contract, right? Like, they are assured so much money and so much revenue at the team level and at the player level that, frankly, teams back in the 80s, right? Like the Jazz were $1 million away from going bankrupt at any given time, right? Like, and now they are incredibly flush with cash. And even if a team tanks, or even if the Jazz didn't sell out the Delta Center, like that's going to be fine for them. It doesn't make a big deal. They will still make a profit, and the value of the franchise will continue to go up because the league has been so successful in running it well as a business, in ensuring that every team throughout the league makes a profit. And, that's good business sense. And I'm sure the 30 owners appreciate Adam Silver for, making moves in that direction, but it does just remove a lot of the stakes of the competition, especially from the team side. And so, yeah, as a result, I think you do see all of these things that, the tanking and load management and all these kind of anti-consumer kind of results of that, consequences of that, that weren't there in the 80s and 90s because profit was, it kind of way more aligned with the product out there on the floor.
Can't tell you how many buddies I have that are lifelong NBA fans that are just like disenfranchised with the whole thing. It's just, I don't know. But to your point, they'll email you their P&L statement with their middle finger and say, what's our problem? Like, we're doing fine. And I get it. One more question in this space, and then we'll do a little Jazz before I set you loose. What's your opinion on, and I'm not a LeBron hater. I've sounded like it this week, but I'm not. I mean, I don't know that we have an example of another athlete that was anointed at the age of like 16 or 17 who lived up to every expectation and superseded most of them. Of LeBron is always will be. But, I'm watching the intros, and I think it was on Shaq's OG team, and they introduce every player. And then they go to LeBron, and he's in street clothes, and we all find out, like, he's not playing. Now, there are a lot of ideas. We're having Amin El-Hassan on coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. His podcast with Tom Haberstroh, Basketball Illuminati. Their theory is he was silently protesting the players playing. I do not. Or give you a because the process at times is arbitrary and it messes with people's money. All LeBron had to do was let somebody know he wasn't going to play. They could have named his replacement, and that player could have had a clause exercised in his contract where he makes a couple hundred that had the opportunity to potentially step in as a replacement, and LeBron pulled that act that was continued by, he's questionable for the Hornets game. No, he's not. Like, he was playing, like, obviously. So I had a real issue with the way he approached what he did over the weekend. What are your thoughts?
I feel like you kind of covered it. LeBron absolutely should have said that if he didn't want to play or didn't feel, like that he was said something earlier, so Domantas Sabonis could have been in that game. And frankly, honestly, ditto with Anthony Edwards, who also did not play for an injury. We heard of both. If we criticize one, we criticize the other. If they didn't want to play, if they felt that their participation was at risk, they should have told the league earlier. And again, a deserving All-Star got play in the game. I have a significant problem with that. It doesn't mean I'm a LeBron hater. It doesn't mean I'm an Anthony Edwards hater. It's just not cool.
I did not mean to take the good points that was embedded in that question. I just know you're a smart guy and you could bounce off. But yeah, this is me reaching for a top. They can take from that week. I mean, I suppose best players in the world has to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, probably. I'm interested in talking about this. So the Jazz practice at 3 o'clock, so really quite soon here. And then once they're done with practice, we'll go over and talk to both Keontae, and I think we're talking to Lowry, Markkanen after practice. And I will ask him that question because I'm curious too, what he took away from it. I kind of wonder if, like, playing as reasonably well as he did in Rising Stars and even on Sunday, like, may give him kind of a boost of confidence. But yeah, well, I'm curious to see what he says. I guess I don't want to put words into his mouth, given that I am just going to ask him about it in an hour and a half.
Fair enough. All right. Do you want to give me a hot Jaden Springer take? I guess Jazz fans should at least get to know the new player on the roster.
mean, he's a 10-day guy, so he's going to be on the game and on the team for the next 5 games, I believe it is, and then. But yeah, I mean, kind of has able to find a consistent role in Boston and Philadelphia. Can defend a little bit. We'll see, kind of, if he gets playing time over the likes of Johnny Juzang, et cetera. If everyone's healthy, I'm curious which way Will Hardy will go with that. But yeah, he's the 15th man on the roster.
All right, before I set you loose, make the final 28 games, I believe it is. The final 28 games for the Jazz. Make it interesting.
Oof. Yeah, I mean, look, it's the same thing as we've done all year, right? Like, it's whether or not the young guys are building blocks, or if you feel comfortable kind of jettisoning them for a shot at another player, like the Jazz did with Ochai Agbaji last year, right? So, is there something there with Bryce Sensabaugh, or is there not? Is there something there with Cody Williams? Can he show, frankly, anything? Can Isaiah continue to improve his shooting percentages? Can Keontae George figure out how to be an impact when his shot isn't going in? I think there are opportunities for them to show those things, and this is the most boring cliche in the world, but it is about stacking, like playing well in not just one game out of 10, but one game out of 2, and then kind of working to improve consistency. So like I'm watching that stuff, and we'll be reporting on that in my articles about the team.
We got a stacking days drop from Andy Larson. My man was down in Provo listening to Kevin Young, weren't you?
I was. Do you see Kevin recognize me in that press conference? I thought that was kind of funny.
I did not see that, but I'm happy for you that our guy Kevin Young recognized you. Did you
You've been watching too many NBA games with a question like that. I was like, yeah, maybe I'm out of my depth here.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but Kevin spent some time in the NBA. If you didn't know that, all you got to do is ask him.
Yeah, and everyone else around the program too. But hey, look, that was fun.
Dude, it was amazing.
And the degree to which BYU tore apart Kansas. I was coming in expecting a good game, but not a evisceration like that.
Yeah, no doubt. Ken Palm's live in studio coming up next, Andy. So we're going to let you go. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll chat soon. Thanks, buddy.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ben.
Andy Larson covers the Utah Jazz for the Salt Lake Tribune, writes a data column. Really interesting piece up that Andy did on daylight savings. Smart kid, man. Whatever Andy writes, I like to read because he's kind of a North Star for us. So appreciate Andy's time today. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Ken Pomeroy live in studio coming up on the other side. You fooled me there for a second. It stopped, but I have to learn when it's this whole era and genre of the punk pop. We can't sing, so we're just going to yell. A lot of aggressive pauses there. So I had to wait, let it breathe a little bit.
This is a good one for that question I had for you the other day. I think Foo Fighters have aged well. They're still pretty good, but it's definitely one of those bands that I listen to a lot, maybe early 2000s, that doesn't get much run anymore.
Yeah, Foo Fighters has aged well. I saw them in concert here last year. Ken Pomeroy is live in studio. Do you mind if I ask you how old you are?
Yeah, 52.
Okay, so you're a little bit older than I am, but you remember, obviously, the 90s. That's like the deal. We grew up. We're both Gen Xers. Porter asked me this week, I thought it was a good question, how has the music that you liked in the 90s aged? And I think it's fair depending on the artist. Yeah, I mean, do you still listen to the music now, Ken, that you did in the 90s?
I do. Sadly, I do. I try to stay up with the times in a number of different ways, but music has not been one of them. Big Foo Fighters guy, by the way.
For
but
sure. Yeah.
It's I think it's aged pretty well. But then they released some newer stuff, right? Kind of.
They did not too long ago.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that.
No, and when I was at the show, I was just waiting for them to get to, the stuff they did in the 90s. And then, right when the decade turned, they had a couple of good albums as well. Nobody listens to us for our music takes, Ken, so I appreciate your time. Ken Pomeroy, live in studio, as my nephew once asked me, Uncle Spence, what is a Ken Pom? Well, a Ken Pom is the man sitting across from me. So if you're watching SportsCenter, if you're watching college basketball shows and they say team is 31st in the Ken Pom, which BYU is right now, it's the work of our guy, Ken Pomeroy. So let's start with what was just a stunning game as Brigham Young dog-walked Kansas. I mean, I'm texting with my brothers who went to BYU. I'm like, dude, they might beat them by 40. I was as unimpressed with Kansas, Ken, as I was impressed with BYU. Let's start with that game. I mean, I don't know, surprised? Like, what were your takeaways? You were down there at the game.
Yeah, I'm more fascinated by the Kansas situation than the BYU situation out of that game. It was, as you said, pretty stunning just the way they lost. Obviously, Kansas was coming off the loss to Utah, which was not necessarily stunning, but certainly surprising, and just had no juice at BYU. We talked about this off the air, but, Bill Self right now, he's running a lineup out there that has a 4 and a 5 that basically don't shoot. So the spacing's a little bit of a problem. And in that game, he decided to start the 4 and the 5 and then also his backup 4. So he had 3 guys in the starting lineup that couldn't shoot. He just leaned into this, 1980s style basketball, and they got off to a terrible start, and it just got worse from there.
So, and it's funny you say the Kansas side of this is a little bit more interesting topically, because the day after the game, I listened to 3 different college football podcasts. Gary Parrish has one. Gary's a friend of the show, so I listened to him. And all of them started with, what the hell is going on with Kansas, as opposed to giving BYU their flowers. So I'll ask you, what the hell is going on with Kansas? Bill Self, 22 years. His first 20 years, he never lost 6 league games. 8 league losses last year, already at 7. Zeke Mayo, A.J. Storr, Ryland Griffin, they're 3 transfers. Zeke has played well. The other 2 haven't been great. What's going on? Like, this does not look like the bluest of blue bloods in the Big 12, which by definition they very much are.
Right. Yeah. Well, you kind of nailed it there. He's missed on some transfers. Didn't have a great, freshman class coming in. Relying on some extent to Hunter Dickinson, their 5th-year center, who is, he's a fine player, but again, more of a not necessarily your most dynamic center out there. And so that's all kind of led to this situation where, their offense really struggles. They don't shoot a lot of threes, but on top of that, they don't get to the free throw line at all, which is a pretty awful combination. Like, usually teams that, rely on a couple of post players are going to get some free throws. I didn't see what the final total was the other night. I think Kansas had like maybe 5 free throw attempts. They might have got some more in garbage time, but it was pretty ugly. And so if you're just scoring 2 at a time, you have to be really good at that. And they were 2 for 5 from the free throw line. So
I didn't realize that. That's wild.
Yeah, so it's an awful combination, and their defense is still pretty good. It was not good against BYU. That was by far their worst defensive game of the year. Their defense, though, generally has been pretty solid. They lead the Big 12 in 2-point percentage defense, which is a great sign for your defense. But offensively, they just are not good enough to reliably hang with the best teams in the league.
So I did not know that their defense normally is good, because against BYU it was atrocious. I mean, look, if Trevin Knell couldn't shoot it, he'd be blogging for KSL about BYU basketball. He's like 27, and it's the one thing he does, and he does it very well. He scored 1,000 points. He's now in their top 5 in three-point field goals made. And my man was wide open. I think even the look on his face, I didn't know if Kansas was going to a zone because Trevin would just run to the corner, and he'd kind of look around. He's like, I'm wide open. Just throw it to me, and I'll shoot it. So they didn't check the player in Trevin Knell, where the one sentence on the scouting report is make him put it on the deck because he can only shoot it. I thought Richie made some tough shots, but how much of that blowout was BYU executing what Kevin wants them to run? How much of it was Kansas simply ignoring really good shooters?
Right. Yeah. BYU played really well. I don't want to downplay that. You don't beat a Kansas team by 30, when you're just playing average ball. But there were certainly some major breakdowns by Kansas defensively. And, I mean, BYU puts that kind of pressure on a defense. They do have that great spacing. They do have shooters in the corners, most of the time. They're going to have, 4 or 5 shooters on the floor. So they just, and they have great size as well. So, there's a lot going in BYU's favor, and they do put pressure on a defense. And there were just a number of breakdowns guarding, pick and roll by Kansas that led to those open threes. But again, BYU deserves that credit. They were able to put that kind of pressure on a defense, and if the defense is not up to it, they can make them look pretty bad. And I do want to point out, this little factoid. So BYU made 2/3 of its 2-point attempts, 20 for 30, and that's the best 2-point percentage against a Kansas defense in a conference game in the Bill Self era, going back at least 25 years, as far as I have data going back. It was really I don't think people realize, but really a historic performance going against the Kansas defense.
Yeah, it's tied for the worst loss that Bill's had at Kansas in 22 years. It was the worst loss that a preseason AP1 team has ever suffered, ever in history of college basketball. So what now are you willing to say about Brigham Young now after they've gone, 7-2 in their last 9? 3 straight wins, including both wins over the Kansas teams, K-State and Kansas. They're going to be at McHale coming up in a couple of days at Arizona. They've got 5 games left. There's a chance they win 12 league games, which would be really, really good, year one Kevin Young. So it feels like they're high speed ahead of the tournament, and it feels like maybe they could be a bit of a problem because when they are knocking down shots, Ken, they are tough. That's a good team. What are you willing to say about what you think BYU's chances are to make spring fun, I guess is how I'll ask it.
Right, yeah. I mean, it feels like a theme that we've encountered before with BYU, even going back to last year.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
But even, they've had seasons before that where, this is when BYU's at its best historically. It's like they play this style, right? They play this kind of way under Mark Pope where they, take a lot of threes. And when they had shooters and had that spacing, the offense looked great. And it looked like it should do some damage in the tournament. And yet the results were never there. So, I do think there's a chance for something good to happen. There's a chance they can get to the Sweet 16, something like that. But NC State went to the Final Four last year, so there's almost anybody can do this, right? If they get hot, BYU certainly in that mix. I am curious to see what happens against Arizona. I have a pet theory that when you have a game like BYU just had, where it comes a little easy, clearly BYU's not 30 points better than Kansas, on a consistent basis. Otherwise, they'd be the best team in college basketball.
Right.
I just wonder how a team comes back from that. Do they really believe they're that good, or do they understand that, hey, we faced a team that was a little bit beaten up and mentally down, and we're going to have to play at a very high level to hang with Arizona. It's going to be if they can do that. I mean, they don't have to even beat Arizona to impress me, but just make a game of it because Arizona's playing very well. Probably the second best team in the league right now, and it'll be if BYU can hang with them, I'll be impressed.
One of the wildest things that's happened with BYU first couple of years in the Big 12, they're 2-0 against Kansas in basketball, and they're 0-2 against Kansas in football, which is so wild. More impressive feat, dog-walking Kansas on your home floor, nearly beating them by 40, or going to Fog last year and getting a win.
Yeah, I'd say it's going on the road and getting a win. The one thing that the Big 12 has is great home environments. And we've seen that really with the local teams, right? BYU's lost twice at home. Utah's lost twice at home. So there's only been 4 losses at home, and Texas Tech actually has 2 of those. So that's one thing that the league has, whether it's Kansas or Iowa State or now Arizona, Kansas State. I mean, there's a number of places where it's very hard to win. And I actually have a a model. You're not surprised by this, probably. I made a model to estimate home court advantage at every location, and
Wow.
and the Big 12 owns the top 4 road environments in the country. So, and collectively, the Big 12 has the toughest home court. So that's just gives you an idea, like picking up a road win, especially at Allen Fieldhouse, but against any good team in this league is extremely impressive.
For somebody that uses his calculator to pay rent, can you explain to me how one approaches building a model for home court? Because I'm picturing you like Mark Zuckerberg in his dorm room writing algorithms on his window. I don't know if that's accurate, but how does one go about the process of building a model to explain home court advantage in college basketball?
Yeah, so it's just a matter of going back in history and kind of figuring out what stats matter to predict like future home court advantage, which it's fairly like simple to identify those things. Like the main thing is points. Like if your scoring margin at home is better than your scoring margin on the road, it's probably indicative that you have a good home court advantage. But there's other things like foul calls, block shots, some things that like denote aggressiveness or denote officiating bias that also play into home court advantage. And so all those factors go into it, and we look like the past 3 or 4 years of that and get a number, and it's pretty good in identifying how good home court advantage is going forward.
How does the Marriott Center stack up with your model? It seems like it's becoming it. Look, it was always, well, not always, but more often than not, the Marriott Center, because BYU's had a lot of really good teams, has been pretty loud. It feels like over the past, I don't know, maybe it was the Fredette thing. Something sparked the basketball community down there. The game ops, they do a really good job. So how does the Marriott Center score with your model as far as the home court advantage?
It is number 13 in the country.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, it's really good. You'd be surprised to note, though, that Utah comes in at number 5. So
Wait.
does that discredit the model at all?
Wait. The University of Utah, who play their basketball at the Huntsman Center, have the 5th best home court advantage in the country?
Yes. So a lot of I neglected to mention another important factor in home court advantage, and that is altitude, which obviously we have around here. But yeah, that's the way it checks out. It's obviously not entirely due to fan support. You
don't say.
Yeah, not getting kind of sellouts up there right now, but it just goes to show you that they might not truly have the 5th best home court advantage, Spence. I'm not going to like die on that hill, but they do have above average home court advantage. And as we've seen this year in Big 12 play, like, it's not a vintage Utah team. And yet at home, they're 6-2 in the Big 12. Like they played all their games at home. They'd be, vying for a league title, right?
What about the Spectrum? Utah State, which feels like, in my estimation, potentially the best home court advantage in the state. But I do, look, mine's anecdotal. It's on feel. It's on the crowd. It's on the noise, right? I don't have any data to back up my take that the Spectrum is as tough a place to play as I feel like maybe anywhere. But what does your model say about Utah State's home court?
It has them at number 8.
Wow.
So, yeah, extremely respectable as well. Kind of.
So according to the Ken Pom model, Utah has the best home court advantage, Utah State 2, and BYU 3.
I mean, they're essentially within the margin of error of the model. They're essentially even, and they're all very good.
Who's number 1?
Number 1 is West Virginia.
Oh, Morgantown.
Yeah. So, decent fan support, not an easy place to get to. That's the thing about home court advantage, too. Like Kansas checks in at 16. I think people would say, like, oh, Kansas has the best home court advantage. But they have a very good home. They also have a very good team. The reason why it's tough to win there, right? They're usually very good. So even if there were no fans there, it'd be tough to win.
So Utah also played Kansas. They also played Kansas State. The Kansas Jayhawks rolled into the state of Utah and played 2 games where they never led.
Right.
That's wild, right? They didn't lead for a second against the Utes, and they didn't lead for – look, the BYU game was 8-0 after 90 seconds, and Bill Self called the timeout, and Kansas never counterpunched, right? And the Utah game was a little bit more back and forth. But what are your latest thoughts on a couple of wins for the Utes against both teams from the state of Kansas? And if they're able to get 3 of their final 5, Craig gets 10 league wins in year 4 for him, which I think would be a step in the right direction. I mean, look, I always hesitate to celebrate, wins and achievements that I think fall far below the expectation I have for our programs. I cover our programs in a way that I believe that we should have NCAA tournament teams as much as possible. I think that should be the standard. And yes, I was spoiled going to school there in the 90s when that was the standard and they were making runs. So I'm not saying that we should, jump out of our seats for joy, but it has been a little bit better as of late. Ken, what are you seeing?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that was always the thing with the Utes that we always talked about was that they're obviously not a higher end Big 12 team, but they should be good enough to pick off some of these teams at home. And it was a little disappointing, when Baylor came here and the game wasn't very close. But since then they've won 4 in a row at home and obviously took care of the Kansas teams. And I applaud. I don't know if I applaud. I admire Craig Smith for continuing to run the high wire act of leaving Lawson Lovering in the game late as he did against Kansas again in a tight game, just letting him out there and knowing he's going to get hacked. And he went 1 for 9, I think, from the free throw line, and didn't matter. Still pulled out the game. So tip of the cap for that. But it's been, I think, refreshing. Obviously, you root for a guy like Craig Smith, and it's good that they're having some success. And the schedule isn't going to be easy down the stretch. Three of the 5 games are on the road. But as you said, there's an opportunity to gain some respectability here heading into the Big 12 tournament, and hopefully establish a situation where they can attract a little more talent for next year.
Is the conference down to what you expected? I mean, I think at the start of the year you referenced the SEC as 1, the Big 12 as 2. It feels like the Big 12 at this point might be 3.
Yeah, the Big 12's 3 in my ratings, just behind the Big 10. But it's close, and we know you discussed how the SEC just absolutely tore through the non-conference play and is establishing a different standard for how good a basketball conference can be. I think it's probably, I don't know, but I think it could be a 1-year type of blip for them where they should come back down to earth. In fact, I'm kind of rolling around some ideas in my head about how the SEC is maybe even a little bit overrated based on their results this year. You look historically at what the best conference does in the NCAA tournament year after year, and they tend to disappoint. And the SEC could be headed down that road as well. But the Big 12's 3rd, but it's like, they've been number 1, either number 1 or number 2, like the last 12 years in my ratings, and mostly number 1 in that time. So it's a little bit of a step down from that standpoint, but it's still an extremely strong lead.
So I referenced BYU, feeling like they are high speed ahead of the tournament, and they're going to be ranked in the top 25, I would imagine, coming up next week. What about the postseason potential for the Utes? Because barring some crazy run in the Big 12 tournament, I don't know that the NCAA tournament is going to be on the table for Craig. But if they're able to go 3-2 down the stretch and they win 10 league games, is there anything they can do besides miraculously winning the Big 12 tournament to actually garner consideration to make the NCAAs as an at-large?
Yeah, I think the only thing they can do is win the rest of their games.
Yeah.
That would probably be it. They're going to have to, prove themselves a little bit more on the road. So, they, like the Cougars, have a road game against Arizona on the docket, and then obviously they got the return trip to Provo. If they won their last 5 games, they would definitely be in the conversation. The real issue is is this team actually good enough to do that? And the way they've played to date, even considering the last 2 wins, they're not good enough to do that. Now maybe they play a lot better. Stranger things have happened in college basketball, although not many stranger things. But that would be the scenario. But they're just so far off the map right now that they need. I don't think they can afford any more losses.
Utah State nearly beat San Jose State by a cool 50 last night. It was a bloodbath, but they have lost to New Mexico twice now. So New Mexico has that lead over them in the conference. It's a 1-game lead at this point. So before we catch a break, let's wrap up the local storylines with where you're at right now on the Aggies, who are 23-4 overall, and they're 13-3 in Mountain West Conference play, which is good for second. So give me your thoughts on Utah State.
I mean, still love where the Aggies are at. They did had a really good performance down in Albuquerque. Lost to New Mexico late, but really, I think leading most of that game for the first 30 minutes, and then New Mexico just finished them off. But that's not a bad loss at all, and they got an interesting stretch coming up now where they host San Diego State this weekend. They beat the Aztecs down there. So to get a sweep of San Diego State, another team that's getting tournament consideration, that would be huge just to kind of cement their profile. I mean, the Aggies probably need to win 2 of these last 4 games to feel pretty good about getting into the tournament. Certainly winning 3 of the last 4 would do it. And So they have the 2 home games with the Aztecs and Air Force, and Air Force hasn't won a game in conference play, so they should win that. And then the road games against Boise State and CSU. So winning 3 of the 4 is certainly possible the way they played, but even 2 out of 4 I think would be good enough. And again, another scenario where the Mountain West typically underperforms in the tournament, so I don't know what the future would hold for the Aggies in the tournament, but I do have their offense ranked at 14th.
All right.
So we won't discuss their defense, but the offense certainly good enough to win some games.
All right, coming up on the other side, we'll kind of expand out of the state's footprint, talk some big picture college hoops. We will get Ken's take on some of the prospects Jazz fans can watch down the stretch to have a little bit of hope while the Jazz continue to lose for, maybe at some point to consider when they could be good again. So Ken Pomeroy is live in studio. Amin Al-Hassan rolls by in the 4 o'clock hour. We'll do a little sports court later on, but it's a busy Thursday drive, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Going to get to a Uinta Golf PGA Tour update. Don't miss the 50% bonus trade-in event. Wow. Bring in your current clubs to Uinta Golf and receive 50% bonus trade-in value towards new 2025 golf clubs. Are you still doing any golf stuff, Ken Palm?
Like physically playing golf or
for a while,
analyzing golf,
right?
No, I haven't done that in a few years. Basketball has just consumed everything, but that was fun. It was fun going back and analyzing like shot link data and stuff like that for these pros. That was a neat data set.
And you are a player. You like to get out and swing a club from time to time.
I'm a player, definitely.
There you go. I like the confidence, Ken. Right now, it's the Mexico Open at Vedanta World. Round 1 is in progress. Don't know how many of the heavy hitters are in this tournament, but we'll give you a quick look at the leaderboard. Our guy, Harry Hall. You know where Harry Hall is from?
He's from Northern Ireland, I believe.
Wow. What the? I'd never even heard of him. Well done. 7 under par. Jeremy Paul is 7 under par as well. I'm looking for notables. Not a lot of big dogs in this tournament, Ken.
Yeah, okay.
Well, anyway, go head to Uinta Golf. I think I'm going to get a new putter. I'm not going to get new clubs. I think I'm getting a new putter. I think I'm doing the TaylorMade Spider, the Scotty Scheffler special.
It doesn't help. I'm just going to warn you.
I know, but you trick yourself into thinking it helps. What kind of clubs you swing? What do you got?
I think I got some Mizuno irons and Callaway driver. That's what's in the bag.
Mizuno irons are solid. That's a good set of golf clubs. I'm excited for the snow to melt so I can get out and swing. I'm going to head down to Arnie's tournament in Orlando coming up in a couple weeks. So excited for that. Ken Pomeroy live in studio. Enough golf talk. Let's get back to some college basketball talk. Actually, let's do a little prospect watch for Jazz fans that are going to watch the final 28 games of the Jazz. And we all know what time it is. It's no secret. They're not even shy about it anymore. And so we're hoping that for the first time in Jazz history, we get a little lottery luck, Ken. The Jazz have been in the lottery 9 times and have never moved up. My whole thing is the good karma from facilitating trades. Jimmy Butler's a Warrior, Luka Doncic is a Laker, and Zanuck in the front office, Danny, they helped out. So what that means is we should be rewarded with good karma to get the number 1 overall pick. How big is the gap between Cooper Flagg and whoever is number 2?
I don't know exactly how to describe that. I mean, number 2 is Dylan Harper, who is very good as well. There is a difference there. I mean, I think Cooper Flagg's a clear number 1. Dylan Harper's a clear number 2. There may be more of a gap between 2 and 3 than there is between 1 and 2. Let's put it that way.
So let's just have a little fun and say the Jazz are able to luck into the number 1 overall pick. It's Cooper.
Yeah, it's auto draft at that point.
Okay.
Put on auto draft and go home. Except the Jazz can't go home. They do have another first round pick, so they'll have to stick around. But yeah, I mean Cooper Flagg's just phenomenal, right? Like he's averaging 20 points a game for one of the best teams in the country, and he's barely 18 years old. And he's not it's not a one-dimensional 20 points a game. Like right now I'm looking at the mock draft at Tankathon, and Ace Bailey out of Rutgers is the number 3 pick, and he is averaging 19 points a game. But it's a little more of a empty 19 points. If you know, it's a little more of a selfish 19 points, right? Ace Bailey's super talented, and he's surely and probably going to be awesome. But Cooper Flagg is he just he can handle the ball. He has great vision. He just has great feel for the game. And on top of that, he's a skilled scorer really from all 3 levels. So he does everything, and he's still got, he still has not entered the prime development years of his life.
Do you? And I don't love comps. I never have, because I think it puts a unfair idea in fans' minds, and I think it sets players up to fail. So I'm not a huge hey, he reminds me of this, he reminds me of that. But for Jazz fans that aren't dialed into Duke basketball, is there an NBA player that you think he kind of plays like?
Yeah, I'm actually with you on the comp thing, partly because of what you say. Like, I think it's kind of a weird thing to compare somebody to somebody else. Like, could you imagine that in your own profession, Spence?
Right.
You get compared to Stephen A. Smith or something.
No, I don't want that.
Well, anyway, yeah. So that's sort of but the second reason is that I actually am not very good at comps.
Okay, that's fine.
My encyclopedic knowledge of historical players is somewhat poor when it comes to like I think the attributes that we're looking for here to make a decent comp. And we've seen people on TV, Jalen Rose, most notably perhaps in the recent past, get in trouble. Most people do these comps, and it's just like, how does the player look? Who looks like Cooper Flagg? Just like facially, right?
Right.
Skin tone, and it's like that's kind of kind of gross. So, yeah, so I'm not a huge comp guy, but just from a production standpoint, Cooper Flagg is an above average number 1 overall pick. Let's put it that way.
All right, fair enough. So if you're a Jazz fan, be dialed in on Duke basketball. And speaking of Duke basketball, Ken, since you and I last spoke, Duke has elevated themselves to the number 1 team in your model. So what has happened over the past couple of weeks? Because Auburn, I think, has stayed clean. They beat Bama. I think last time we spoke, you had Auburn at 1. Now Duke is at 1. Auburn is at 2. What exactly is flipped?
Well, I mean, they're basically co-number ones. They're very close in the ratings. Auburn's had some closer games, here in the last few weeks, whereas Duke really has not. They did lose to Clemson on the road a couple of weeks ago, but otherwise they're doing to the ACC what Gonzaga has typically done to like the WCC, and that's kind of the storyline here headed into the tournament. Is like there's going to be questions about Duke against quality competition. They do get a very extremely rare February non-conference game on Saturday against Illinois. If you want to see NBA prospects on the floor, that's a great chance because Illinois themselves has a couple of potential first-rounders in Kasparis Yakachonis and Will Riley, and obviously Duke has 3 freshmen as well that could end up going in the top 10 of the draft. So great showcase for that. But that's the story with Duke. Like, they've looked great. The competition has not been so great. The ACC is historically bad this year. That may benefit Duke. I don't know. Like, to some extent, I feel like you play in a weak league like Gonzaga, has proven over the years is consistently getting, fairly deep into the tournament. I mean, a number of Sweet 16s in a row. You don't have that, like, physical wear and tear playing against these weaker teams. So we'll see if that benefits Duke or not. But, I mean, it's pretty clear right now. Duke and Auburn, I think, are the 2 best teams in the country. Houston is extremely close to them. I mean, I would not put up a fight if you said Houston was in that group as well. And then there's maybe a little bit of a more sizable drop-off after that.
Does Houston have a peer in the Big 12? I mean, I have your model in front of me. I have your rankings in front of me. But I ask it because every time I watch Houston, it just feels almost unfair. I mean, we talked about the Ute game where I'm watching it, and like if you didn't know anything about these 2 teams, you'd turn on the game and you'd be like, why are they playing an exhibition game with one team that clearly has talent and size and strength that the other teams? It was like Utah barely even got looks at the bucket. I think at some point they had far more turnovers than field goals all game long, and that's just one snapshot. It was 70-36, so not close, but they blow teams, out of the gym. So does Houston have a peer in the Big 12 right now?
Well, first, let me just say we need to give equal opportunity here. Houston also beat BYU 86-55. Right, so let's not forget. I mean, it was a little bit earlier in the year, but it was a similar.
I truly feel like every time I watch them, I'm like, it's unfair. They're a lot better than their peers.
Yeah, I think they've won something like 11 straight road games in conference play.
That is wild.
Yeah, so we're talking about how tough it is to win on the road, but they do it somehow. And you are right. I mean, the Houston team under Kelvin Sampson has always been characterized by maximum effort. 5 guys on the floor giving 100%. They're not necessarily the most skilled team, but they're going to give a ton of effort, and they make up for a lot of their lack of skill offensively by getting a bunch of offensive rebounds, and that's true this year. They're still 9th in the country in offensive rebound percentage. But the thing about this year's team is that they're 5th in the country at 3-point shooting. Like, this is a team that you watch their offense and you'd think, it's pretty ugly. Like, I understand why it's somewhat effective because they do get loose balls and they can create some points that way. But they can shoot now. It's really reminiscent of like the 2019 Virginia team where, Virginia under Tony Bennett for years and years had a great defense and were, disciplined and did all the things that coaches want you to do. And their offense was extremely ugly. And then they suddenly put together a pretty talented offense and ended up winning a national title. And this is really the opportunity here for Kelvin Sampson to kind of duplicate that because it's still a great defensive team. They're still going to hustle. They're still going to get 75% of the 50-50 balls, if that makes sense. And their offense is pretty dangerous as well.
Yeah, he plays 8 guys more than 14 minutes a night, and 6 of the 8 shoot it from 3. And 5 of them shoot better than 40%. So that's wild. An 8-man rotation for Kelvin Sampson, and I think Kevin plays 11 for BYU. Is there a preferred, like, I can always remember Pat Riley as the Knicks were approaching the playoffs. In practice, he would yell, I want my 8. Who are going to be my 8, right? And so that's kind of the old school mentality when you're playing tournament basketball or playoff basketball. You trim your rotation because so much is at stake. In the NBA, there's a little bit of a different trend. Steve Kerr has been playing 10, 11, sometimes 12 guys a night. We've seen it from Will as well. is there a new understanding of how many minutes you want each player playing? And is Kelvin's approach of kind of old school 8-man rotation an outlier these days? Or does it just depend?
Might be a little bit short, but you're not seeing a lot of guys at the college level playing 10 or 11. And we should point out even Kevin Young, like the other night, Cannon Catchings really didn't get off the bench. So even though there may have been 11 guys in the box score, like ultimately he decided to go with Trey Stewart for a lot of the minutes there, and Catchings, the guy who was starting early in the season, suddenly finds himself really not getting off the bench. So and the other thing is, once you get to the tournament or the playoffs in the NBA, like inevitably the rotations are going to shrink. So I would imagine, if we see BYU in the tournament, they're gonna find their 8 guys that they really like, and if there's foul trouble, they know they can go 9 or 10 deep. But for the most part, you want your best guys out there, and Kelvin Sampson doesn't have much of a choice. His rotation drops off pretty badly after 8 guys, so that's why you see the minutes distribution for that team that you do.
Craig's rotation for the Utes seems to really depend on the opponent. There's not a ton of consistency. I do think he's settled on his 5. And Jake Wallin has played better than I thought he could. He had a double-double against Kansas. He had 12 boards. But it really does depend on the night. And sometimes I watch Keanu Dawes and feel like he needs more minutes. And could they use, Myro Little's ball handling a little bit more? Is it really predicated on whatever the night needs as far as the way Craig has handled his rotation?
Yeah, it seems like there's a little, positional bias there as well. Like they're a little more loaded in the wing category, and so they can go a little deeper into that well as opposed to the big category. We mentioned like Lovering being kind of left on the floor in crucial moments, despite the fact that he's kind of a liability from the free throw line. And I think he's just like clearly the best option there for other reasons. And so Craig elects to kind of go that direction. But the Utah situation is slightly different too, I think, where there's maybe not like obvious stars on the team. Gabe Madsen notwithstanding, I don't know if he's not really a star caliber type of guy, but I think clearly one of the better offensive options. But for the most part, there's some interchangeable parts there, and so he can mix and match things as the game situation requires.
Tell me what you've seen from Mark Pope in his first year at Kentucky. I mean, obviously that is, for our listeners that aren't totally familiar, if you think of the craziest fan base from whatever sport that you're thinking of, Kentucky basketball fans are that for college hoops. Big Blue Nation, they are wild. And the majority of the reaction after Mark was hired was not positive, because I think Mark was either their 4th or 5th choice from what I read. And obviously John Calipari did a great job of acquiring talent, not such a great job of winning consistently. He did win a national championship, of course, which you have to give him a lot of credit. And it hasn't been great for Calipari year 1 in Arkansas. But what about year 1 for Mark Pope in Kentucky?
I would call it a success. As you mentioned, he did get hired a little bit late because they were looking at other candidates. There was a pretty high-profile courting of Scott Drew in there, but ultimately settled on Mark, and it's worked out pretty well. I mean, I think there were some questions about the roster coming into the season. He didn't really get high-profile transfers, I would say. He got a bunch of good transfers, and he's ultimately meshed those guys together pretty well. He's dealt with some injuries. They've been out a couple of starters, and Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler in the past few games, and still are hanging on. They swept Tennessee this year. They're just 7-6 in conference, but it's also a brutal conference, and they're going to easily make the tournament and get a decent seed. And if they can get healthy, they'll be a pretty dangerous team in the tournament. They're not with that top group of teams that we talked about earlier, but perhaps in a second group of teams that, you take a flyer on in your bracket to get to the Final Four.
So I'm a child of the Big East, Ken, as you know, going to the Big East tournaments, preseason Big East tournaments. There was the Ray Allen Iverson battle back in the day with Georgetown and UConn. I was there for Melo's preseason Big East tournament when he was a freshman at Syracuse. So I got to ask you about the Johnnies. Our moral compass, Rick Pitino, has taken over that program. And say what you want about him, the guy can coach, can he? I mean, Davon Smith, right? He's a former Utes there.
Yep.
You have them at 16 in your model. What stands out about the Johnnies this year?
Well, their defense has been extremely impressive. Number 2 in the country, number 6 in the country in 2-point percentage defense. Really kind of a makeup, similar to, say, Houston, where it's like not a sexy offense, but, you're going to get maximum effort out of these guys. And, not necessarily big vertically, but a bunch of thick guys, that just really are physical. And, that comes in handy down the stretch when the officials might be calling slightly fewer fouls and letting a little more go as we get into these late season games. So it's not a pretty team to watch, but they do get results. I mean, you just feel like when you're watching them, they are, they're giving you maximum effort. They're not leaving anything out on the court. And to the extent that they lose games, which they've only done 4 times this year, and we should point out they have 4 losses this year. Okay, 1 by 2 points, 1 by 1 point, 1 by 3 points, and 1 in double overtime.
Wow, that's wild.
They're pretty close to being undefeated, guys.
Jeez.
Like that's, yeah. Rick Pitino certainly still say what you want about the guy. Obviously, a value hire for St. John's. One of the best coaches in the game.
All right, before I set you loose, I'm not going to say this is a hot take because you have them highly ranked in your model. But Auburn, the number 2 team in the country, number 1 team in the SEC. How close? Every time I've watched Florida this year, like. And maybe I'm not paying enough attention because my thought is like they should be talked about more. Like every time I watch them, they look elite. Are they a legit threat to Auburn in the SEC?
I think they're a legit threat to like they should have national championships type goals. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
they're not on the level of those top 3 teams, but they're the next team in line. They've just been consistently really good this year. To go 10-3 in conference play again in the best conference in maybe the history of basketball is pretty impressive. So they got all of that. Going for him. And, again, a team that, unlike those top 3, kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, those top 3 teams that I'm talking about, they were all top 3 in my preseason ratings. Florida was 26th in my preseason ratings. I think they were like 20 in the AP. But anyway, it was a team that people thought would be good, but not great. And maybe people are waiting for them to, come back down to earth, but there has really been no sign of that through 25 games.
All right, Ken, we are 8 days away from March, which is wild, and I can't wait because, basketball, golf, all the things I enjoy is really awesome in March. So for people that are about to fill out brackets, your family's going to send you an email, your work's going to send you an email. I utilize your stuff every time I sit down to do mine. Let's be clear, there's no perfect model. If there was, Ken would be a billionaire. He would have bought an island by now. But how can people go get your work?
They can just go to kenpalm.com and sign up for 1 year of a subscription. You get access to a whole bunch of great data on the team and player level, and it's good for 12 months. So it's not just for the end of the tournament, but you'll be able to use it well into next season.
All right, Ken, good stuff, man. Good to see you, all right?
All right, thanks, Spence.
All right, don't forget, we got Amin Al-Hassan during the 4 o'clock hour. And also don't forget, we have the 4 Nations Face-Off Championship game tonight on the radio station. That comes your way following the Craig Smith Coaches Show, which will begin at 6 o'clock. To drive on a Thursday afternoon right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we got Amin El Hassan joining us coming up in the 4 o'clock hour to talk some NBA and some Jazz. The second half of the season for the Utah Jazz gets going tomorrow. They're welcoming in Oklahoma City. But welcoming in now a very special guest from our friends at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. Matt, I'm going to say Francom. Is that right?
Yeah, Frankum.
Frankum. Matt Frankum. Good enough. Matt, how are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing great.
I appreciate you coming in today. So before we get to what Matt wants to talk about, today we're going to tell you about causes and treatments for hair loss, something that's very important to a lot of men. I want to kind of reiterate the deals that we already have for you at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. Christine stopped in with a deal on Botox, okay, so you can check that out for your significant other. Jason stopped in with a deal on laser hair removal. So laser treatments are offering 25% off. Pool season will be here. Don't be the guy that takes off the shirt and looks like a gorilla. Get that taken care of. And then Michael stopped in and offered a free skin consultation for those of you that are like me that play a lot of golf and are in the sun a ton during the summer. We have a beautiful state, but we're the number one state in the country in skin cancer diagnosis per capita. So if you've not been checked out, head to toe, check out Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. But Matt, let's talk hair loss. What do you want our listeners to know?
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for having me, first of all.
Sure, man.
And,
good to see you.
We're making American men and women beautiful again.
There we go.
It turns out that dermatologists do more than skin. We do hair conditions and diseases, anything that causes hair loss. So we're happy to check out, if you've got some hair loss, some thinning, maybe the years are going by and you don't look quite as good as you thought you or think you should be looking. And let's do a little evaluation and see what we can do for you.
So I know Jason has helped out a number of my friends that are in this spot where they're getting older and you see their hairline receding a little bit. You got some spots you want to take care of. So I know people are probably skeptical, but I've seen these results. You actually are helping people. So let's talk about the process. How do you help, men and women right now that are listening to the show that are being affected by hair loss? How does that work?
So you come in, make an appointment, see one of us there at Hadley Dermatology. And I happen to be in the West Point Clinic. We do an evaluation. We see what it is that's causing the problem. There's lots of things. There's genetic problems. There's diseases. There's sort of these acute problems. Even medications that are kind of popular right now contribute to hair loss. That's kind of a bigger thing that we've noticed with some of the weight loss medications.
What are some of the treatments you guys have available for our listeners who are tuned in? How can you help them out?
Yeah, so there are topical medications. I think, you can get some of those through some over-the-counter places, but we specialize in more of the oral medications and some things that are newer that haven't been utilized for hair loss, and they're really becoming more utilized and seeing a lot of improvement and effectiveness lately.
All right, guys, here's the deal. Now that Matt has brought to the table the potential for you guys to go take care of your hair loss issues, at Hadley Clinic Dermatology, we now have offers for Botox. We now have offers for laser treatments. We have offers for skin consultations, also some sunscreen options where you'll save on their special sunscreen up at Ogden Clinic Dermatology, and now an offer for hair loss treatment as well. So it's kind of a menu. You got 5 great offers, and whichever one you want to land on, I would do it now at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. The number is 801-657-5664. That's 801-657-5664, 801-657-5664, or visit HadleyDermatology.com. Matt, good to meet you, man. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, we'll catch a quick break. Amin El Hassan joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Going to do a little sports court on the program today. Coming up, we'll call that about 25, 30 minutes from right now. 5 o'clock hour of the program. After that, Craig Smith Coach's show follows our show to talk about Utah hoops. And then we will have the Four Nations Face-Off Final right here on ESPN 700 between Canada and the U.S. Our next guest, friend of the show, but it's been a while. It's been too long. Amin Al-Hassan, back on the drive on a Thursday. Amin, happy Thursday, sir. How you been?
Doing well. Can't complain.
There you go. Appreciate the time. So let's get your reaction to the news of the day today. Victor Wembanyama will miss the rest of the season with a blood clot in his shoulder. Now, my first thought, was Chris Bosh. I hate to say it, but it just was. Now, this is in his shoulder, not his lower leg. We've seen Amen Thompson deal with this, Brandon Ingram deal with this, and a lot of Spurs fans probably pretty nervous about the news. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I was taping my show Oddball with Izzy Gutierrez when the news broke, and Izzy was the one that had to kind of remind me of Brandon Ingram and Amen Thompson because originally my first thought was Chris Bosh, and then a good friend of mine, John Shoemate, who passed away not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago actually. He was a top 5 pick in the draft. He had a storied career at Notre Dame, but his career was first interrupted several times because of clotting, and then eventually he had to retire because of blood clotting. And so it's a very serious issue. It's not necessarily kind of a end to his career. As we said, there have been plenty of examples of guys who got on the medication, got it sorted out, and came back and were perfectly fine and haven't had to deal with it again. But it just, it's one of those things where I think we all have to be cognizant that, hey, none of this stuff is guaranteed. And you hope that the kid bounces back great because he's been such a breath of fresh air for the league, not only with his play, but with his personality and kind of his genuine energy when it comes to the game of basketball.
So based off of what I was reading, this is an instant shut it down entirely for 6 months situation based off of the medication that you have to take right away, because a blood clot is not a sprained ankle. You have to take action immediately to make sure that you're taken care of just as a person, let alone a basketball player. What do you think this process is going to be like? Because if it's a 6 month shutdown, he's going to be knocking on the door just to get ready for the start of next season. So what do you think the next 6-7 months are going to look like for Victor Wembanyama?
Well, frustrating. It's got to be frustrating for sure because one of the things that you really enjoy doing, you're not going to be able to do.
Yep.
The conversation that Izzy and I had was, these kind of life events kind of take one or two paths on people, impacts on people. One is this is another challenge, and I'm going to defeat this challenge, and I'm going to come back better than ever, and kind of, this almost determination that comes from it. The other is, oh my God, I've been wasting my life worried about things that really don't matter. And now that life and death has entered the equation, I'm going to cherish the things that do matter, like family and friendship and quality of life and all that. I tend to think that Wembanyama is more of the former, simply because I think he's already someone who's with a healthy work-life balance. He seems to be well-rounded. He's got interests. He's not afraid of expressing those interests that are not basketball. So I kind of feel like he's going to look at it as just another challenge to be bested rather than a wake-up call that he's been living his life the wrong way.
What do you think? And I'm chuckling because I'm just picturing, look, San Antonio, 23 wins, and the Jazz have 13, the Pelicans have 13. So there's still a major gap between where the Spurs are now and some of the worst teams in the league, Washington with 9 wins. But what do you think the Spurs do now? Do you think they completely just shut it down and try to get another top lottery pick in a draft that's absolutely packed? What's the rest of the year look like for the San Antonio Spurs?
Oh, Spence, are you asking me if the Spurs are going to play capture the flag?
Yes.
Are you? Hold on.
It's exactly what I'm asking you.
If the San Antonio Spurs, a team that went to the Western Conference Finals in 1995 and had the MVP of the league, and the next year won 55 or 56 games, and then the year after that had an unfortunate injury to their franchise player, just happened to be the same year that this can't-miss prospect out of Wake Forest is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got him, and then they turned on the other side, and all of a sudden they were good again with the best player generationally probably for his entire class. Are you asking me if that's going to happen again, Spence? Is that what you're kind of questioning?
If you want my third eye to be open, I'll ask you if this is really a blood clot, bro. I can go as deep as you want.
No, I'm sure the Spurs are, they'll be fine. Yeah. They would never set something up.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's cruel because I feel like the Jazz should have done what they're doing now a few years ago when this kid was available, but instead the Jazz decided to be fine being average for a couple of years, and they had some late lottery picks, and these kids just really haven't popped very much. So I understand what you're saying tongue in cheek, but the Spurs did exactly what they should have done a few years ago, and the Jazz didn't, and now we're kind of paying the price for it around here.
It is remarkable, right, that every time there's a generational talent, these guys just happen to have like the on ramp to being terrible at the right time and not terrible for too long, right? You don't have to deal with a whole lot of terrible in San Antonio. They're just going to be terrible for this small window, and it seems to work out for them.
It sure does. It sure does. So whether it's intelligence, timing, or luck, or a combination of all three, you got to give them a lot of credit. But let's have a little fun now with the Utah Jazz. And let's say for the first time in Jazz history, the Jazz actually get lottery luck. The Jazz have been in the lottery 9 times, and they've never moved up. If they're able to cash in on this really difficult season for a fan base around here that's used to winning to digest and snag Cooper Flagg #1, and they roll into next season with a front court of Walker Kessler, Larry Markin, and Cooper Flagg, a front court that would be very popular around here. I'll just leave it there. Then we're kind of on to something, aren't we? Like if this entire process leads to that, maybe this fan base has something to latch on to.
Yeah, I just want to point out how staggered I am. You said the Jazz have been to the lottery 9 times in their franchise history.
Yeah, and have never moved up.
I mean, look, okay, never moved up feels like, oh, wow, that's kind of tough. But to have only been there 9 times.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
Pretty remarkable. And by the way, 3 of them, so 33% of them were in that right now. That's very, very, very remarkable. Obviously, Cooper Flagg is the kind of talent where you could 30 teams, and they all need a Cooper Flagg. Utah is kind of, look, Danny Ainge has a vision of how to do this. He's done it before, and what we're seeing is kind of, the same sort of formula in terms of when you look at the deals, when you look at him getting involved in that Lakers Mavericks deal as a third party, not even knowing who the deal is for, all of that kind of accumulation. He's doing this in the same way he did it in the mid-2000s when he realized that Paul Pierce alone wasn't going to get it done and he needed to make a bold move. And so the question becomes, and I think this is the part where everyone gets frustrated, is you say, well, what is that bold move going to be? Well, you don't know. And I think that's the thing when, way back when, I think of Philadelphia, when people were praising Sam Hinkie. Oh, for he's doing this and he's accumulating picks, and this is the way to do it. If you're not first, you're last, Ricky Bobby style. And what I said at the time is, on paper, yeah, that's what you do. But this thing doesn't happen on paper, and you've got ownership to answer to, and even owners who can pretend they're bought in and they come from tech or finance and they understand these kind of processes. Ultimately, they still have kids who go to school and get teased because their dad owns the team and ruined it. So your capacity to run this playbook, in essence, is directly proportionate to how confident you are in the ownership behind you, sticking behind you. In the case of Sam Presti, that guy had full range. He could do it forever. And they were never going to give up on him because they knew, hey, we got ourselves one of the best guys in the league. Does Danny Ainge have that sort of job security with Ryan Smith? I don't know. One would think, because his track record and obviously who he is locally, one would think that he's got that job security. But again, hell hath no fury, like my kids coming home from school crying because they got made fun of.
Well, look, I think the answer to the job security question is Danny has tremendous job security. I mean, Ryan has been front facing about how much of a fan he always was of Danny, because Ryan's a big BYU fan, and then obviously Danny goes on to do great things in pro basketball. This was born out of a fan relationship between the owner and the executive, far more than it was born out of a friendship. Now, it seems that it has become that now, and I'm sure Danny appreciates this ability to not necessarily put in the same type of groundwork Zanuck does, yet get paid a lot more money and kind of swoop in when he needs to. And I know that he's involved, but Justin's the one that seems to be doing the work on the ground. But here's the question based off of the dynamic. Ryan fancies himself as a basketball guy. He's in the meetings. He has input. And I can tell you that both Dennis Lindsay and Quinn Snyder had just one meeting with ownership and was like, nope, I'm good. In your history around the league, meddling owners that think they're basketball people, how does that typically work out?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that the relationship between Danny and Ryan was born out of a fandom, because to answer your question, I can think of another owner-GM combo that was born out of a fandom. It was Robert Sarver and Steve Kerr in Phoenix.
Yep.
Robert Sarver was a University of Arizona grad, and he was a big fan of Steve Kerr at U of A. He was obviously a big fan of Steve Kerr as an NBA player. And, you know, at first it was like that. It was like, yeah, he listened to Steve, and then at some point, Robert just thought he knew better. And so anything that Steve came up with, or we came up with as a staff, Robert would basically second guess and leak to other people, asking them their opinions, and our business was out in the streets. So typically what I found is the more your owner thinks he knows basketball, the more dangerous your owner becomes.
Yep.
Right? Because he's much more likely to believe, look, I get it. I understand. I'm not like these other guys. I'm cool. Right? And as we all know from high school, the guy who announces he's cool, not really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The cool guy doesn't have to announce he's cool. He just is. And typically these owners who think they know what they're talking about are not. They don't know what they're talking about. I'll give you another example. A current example is Matt Ishbia in Phoenix, who I would say legitimately could say, I know basketball. I played high-level D1 basketball. I won a national championship. I played for Tom Izzo, one of the greatest coaches of all time. I'm friends with Isaiah Thomas. I'm friends with Jason Richardson. I'm friends with all these great NBA players, Zach Randolph, et cetera, et cetera. So if there ever was anyone who could say, oh, I actually know this stuff, it's Matt Ishbia, and yet it hasn't really turned out great. I'll give you another one. Maybe you may have heard of this guy, Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Some might say he knew basketball better than any of us. But when put in that position to be the final say, he turns out he wasn't that great at running a basketball team, because at some point it gets in the way. At some point your know-it-allness gets in the way, and ultimately the best owner is the owner that at the beginning of the year says, this is the number, you can't spend over it, and we come to an agreement on what the expectations are, and then I don't do anything. I just sit back and watch the show, and at the end of the year, we look at the numbers. We look at like where we were according to expectations. If there are things that make us alter the plan midway through, we have a conversation about that. But the more you're hands-on and there and sitting on meetings and all that and giving your opinion, the more you end up with kind of what I would like to say is mediocre results.
One more Jazz thing, because you're good at this and you can make it interesting. There's not a lot of things topically with this roster that I really care to ask you about, because we all know the deal. We all know what they're doing. But this is a fan base, as we outlined, with 9 lottery appearances. It indicates that this fan base is used to winning basketball. Now, we haven't had a championship out here. And if I'm honest, we haven't had a championship team here since 1998, in my opinion. And that was John and Carl's best and, quite frankly, last chance to get it done. And, of course, Mike took rings off their fingers, as he did to our guy Pat Ewing and Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, Charles Barkley. We could keep going. It is a fan base that's used to winning and is championship thirsty. What's a reasonable expectation during this process where it is asset accumulation? You hope a young player or two pops, then you hope you get lottery luck. I mean, that's as reductive as I can be about what they're trying to do. What's a reasonable expectation to this fan base as to when winning basketball might be back in Salt Lake City?
Well, I think, again, we have to define what winning is. Is winning a championship? I don't know. Maybe never. And that's something that everyone has to come to grips with. Every fan in the league, except for the Lakers. So how do they keep doing it? But everyone else, you have to come to grips with, if your thing is my destination championship, you got to be ready that you may never see that destination. So what do you want to see in the meantime? You want to see growth, you want to see improvement, and you want to see standards, right? And the thing I always go back to Sam Presti in the Oklahoma City Thunder and comparing and contrasting what he did versus what Sam Hinkie did in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, Sam Hinkie said, I need to be terrible so I can get all these lottery picks and just be a clearinghouse for other people's crap so I could keep getting lottery picks. And he did that by stocking his roster with players who were not NBA talent. No disrespect to those guys. They just weren't NBA caliber players. They were guys who, in a regular situation, would never make an NBA team. But in this situation, because they're trying to be as bad as possible, welcome aboard. And he did that over years. And then even as he hit on some of his guys, he refused to stock his roster with vets. He refused to have any sort of semblance of, we're going to play competitive, tough basketball. We're just going to get blown out every night. And the contrast is the Oklahoma City Thunder, where, yes, they were doing the same thing. Yes, they were trying to be bad. Yes, they were getting lottery picks. Yes, they were clearing house. But beyond hitting on their picks, they maintained the entire time, this is the standard. The people talk about heat culture, they got thunder culture over there. And we have standards, and we're going to do things the right way. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. These are the expectations. And so what happens is the players that you have there are growing up in a system and in a culture that is positive and a winning culture despite those standings not being that. To me, if I'm a bad team, if I'm a fan of a bad franchise, that's what I want to see. I want to see players that execute. I want to see players that defend and play both sides of the ball. I want to see players that are developing and be able to do both, multiple things as opposed to being specialists, right? And I want to see my team be competitive even if we win 12 games all year long. I want us to win 12 games, lose 70 games by 5 points, 7 points, 9 points. Like I want us to be leading, and then we blew the lead down the stretch. Like those are the type of losses where you can walk away and say, we had a legitimate chance, and either we got out-talented or we made mistakes of youth that we will not make in the future. And if you're Utah, if you're a Jazz fan, I think you look at this team, you want to see players that play hard. You want to see players that are competing. And if they're losing due to bad decisions, like when the Collier kid waves off Colin Sexton to still get an 8-second count, you want that to be seared in his brain so that he becomes a number one time and score situation type of player.
So, well, I want to move over here. We had Tom Haberstroh on and Zach Harper on this week, and so we've talked to friends of yours, coworkers of yours about All-Star Weekend, and I think I'm just now resigned. Look, for 30 years or 40 years, it was the best pickup basketball game in the world, and it was awesome. And it wasn't every year, and they didn't play hard 1 through 48. I understand that. And the reason why I still bemoan what it's become is I miss what it once was. Is there any going back, or at this point, is it just going to be an undigestible weekend regardless of everybody yelling about how bad it is?
There is a going back. Unfortunately, the guy who is going to do that for us is out for the rest of the year with a blood clot, and hopefully he's fine next year. But it starts in the locker room. All of these fixes that they've tried, Elam ending, draft your own team, mini tournament, like all of these things, they all come down to one simple premise, which is the 24 guys in that locker room, for whatever reason, aren't taking it seriously. And so we're going to do whatever we can to manufacture something that causes them to take it seriously. I thought the tournament, the basketball part of it was an improvement over the last 3 or 4 years. We got competitive basketball for the first time. I thought the Rising Stars in their game, that was the best game of the three that we saw on Sunday. I thought the championship game was okay. It was decent. I thought the first game was kind of lackadaisical. But the point is, they created this gimmick because they wanted guys to burn calories. Like you said, we're not asking for 1 through 48. We're not asking for Game 7 intensity. We're not asking for NBA Finals intensity. We're not asking for playoff intensity. We're not even asking for regular season intensity. Can I get preseason intensity? Preseason intensity looks like basketball people want to watch. Because here's the deal. These are the greatest players in the world. They dribble better than anybody else. They shoot better than anybody else. They dunk on people, all that stuff. You know what makes that crazy crossover, that crazy three-pointer, that crazy dunk look cool? It's resistance. Resistance makes, he tried to stop him and he couldn't. He tried to block it and he couldn't, right? The moment you remove resistance, it's just guys getting shots up before the pickup game starts. Ever been to the gym, Spence, or maybe at the playground, and we still haven't figured out what teams are. Guys are just getting shots up. That's what the All-Star game has become over the last few years. And so until those 24 guys understand, hey, I got to try a little bit. I can't completely treat it like a joke. It's going to stay the way it is no matter what the format is.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. All right, buddy, before I set you loose, I have not been able to catch up with you since Luka Doncic was traded to the Lakers.
Oh,
and look, man, I like everybody else, the alert popped on my phone, and I said, nope, not real, no chance. Like everybody else, I texted everybody that I know in the league to try to make sense of this. And I guess we can be as reductive as that Nico just didn't like Luka and likes AD. I guess that's the deal. I've talked to more than a handful of executives that still don't buy it and believe there's something that none of us know. One of them said, we'll find out in Summer League when we're all together. It didn't make sense then. It still doesn't make sense to me now. So your reaction when you saw the news, and now a few weeks later, where are you at with that trade?
Yeah, I saw a GM at All-Star Weekend, and the first thing he asked me was, what do you think happened? Because he couldn't figure it out. We're all kind of in the dark, searching, trying to make sense out of nonsense, if we're going to be perfectly honest here. I don't know. I think the stuff that has come out recently clarify some of it. Some of it is Nico. Nico basically grew up in the NBA with Kobe Bryant, on Kobe Bryant's side. So if that's your vision of what a franchise player is, I can imagine how Luka Doncic could be a jarring departure, right? Like, that's got to be the crazy, like, from this guy who's a workaholic, wakes up at 4 a.m, and, doesn't put any poison, so to speak, in his body, to the beer-drinking, hookah-smoking, lovable, affable guy, like, who's never in shape. Like, it has to be a complete departure from everything you've believed in, right? You got ownership that also has, like, shaky kind of aspirations, I think. You want to talk about another situation where ownership is kind of meddling? Hearing him talk, the Patrick Dumont talk to the Dallas Morning News and explain kind of his visions and stuff, you're like, oh, my God, this guy doesn't sound bright at all when it comes to basketball. So I think there's a little bit of that. There's always an ownership element in any one of these types of deals. I think there's a little bit of Nico Harrison's worldview based on his basketball upbringing, and maybe there's something more to it than that. If so, I still go back to this. You all those things I named, you could tell me, okay, that's why we got to trade Luka Doncic. Okay, I see it. I don't agree with it, but I see it. But the part where your return for him is that's the part where you lose everybody. That's the part where you lose everybody. And so I'll say it like we talked about on Basketball Illuminati a couple of weeks ago or whatever it was. Once you've made up your mind, I have to trade this guy, which it sounds like they did, then why do you care if it's a secret or not? Why do you care if he's uncomfortable or not? Why do you care if the fans are upset or not? At that point, then you play it to its natural conclusion and try to get as much as you can for them.
Wild, man. I still, whenever I actually kind of marinate on it, I'm like, I still can't believe you do this with a 25-year-old global superstar, not just transcendent talent, global superstar. But we'll see how it plays out, man. Hey, it's been too long. It's great to hear your voice. I'll set you loose. Have a great weekend, okay?
Thanks a lot, Spence.
All right. Amin Elhassan spent a number of years in NBA front offices with the Knicks and the Suns, and he's been on the media side of things for about 15 years now. Busy guy, one of those guys that has like 7 different podcasts. At Darth Amin is where you find him on social. He is a Star Wars fan. We will catch a quick break. We're going to do some sports court coming up on the other side. Don't forget, we will launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program prior to saying goodnight at 6. At 6 o'clock, you're going to hear the Craig Smith Coaches Show with Craig Smith and our guy Bill Riley to talk some Utah hoops. Upon the conclusion of the Craig Smith Coaches Show, it is time for the Four Nations Face-Off Final. We'll join that in progress live in Boston, the U.S. and Canada. So, more of the drive coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends over at Handy and Handy. No Garrett today. It's just our guy, Preston, on a Thursday afternoon. Preston, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Hey, Spence. Happy Thursday. How are you?
I'm well. I appreciate the time today. So we'll start out with a situation where Donald Trump's transgender athlete ban is now facing a federal lawsuit. Looks like two teenage girls from New Hampshire are legally challenging the executive orders. Preston, so fill us in here.
Yeah, so we know that a few weeks ago there was an executive order signed by President Trump entitled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports," and this is no new issue. This is something we've talked about a number of times on Sports Court, and as a result of these issues, states have enacted a lot of laws, including the state of Utah. And a lot of these laws, essentially, they're indicating that transgender women should not be playing in men's or in women's sports. And a lot of these laws are under fire, and the Utah law is being litigated right now. But essentially, this executive order by Trump, we talk about Title IX a lot and discrimination based on gender. Well, Trump's order basically says allowing transgender athletes to play is in violation of Title IX. So what he enacted was saying that any entities receiving federal funding need to comply with this and abide by Title IX. And another part was that if you don't, you could be penalized and lose this funding. So a couple of New Hampshire transgender athletes, one a tennis player, one a soccer player, they're already in litigation, and they're litigating a statute in New Hampshire, basically claiming that it violates a number of constitutional rights. It's violation of Title IX, equal protection, discrimination. So it's going down the road, and the judge in New Hampshire, the federal judge in New Hampshire, issues an injunction basically saying we're not going to apply this law right now, and you're allowed to play for the time being. Well, probably getting ahead of it, and because I think we're going to see this, these two girls have now amended their lawsuit and decided to include Donald Trump, the United States Attorney General, and a bunch of federal officials that have been involved in this, including this in it, because I think they're seeing down the road that, well, if we're challenging the state thing, we might as well challenge this at this point. And we know there's so many different states have different laws, and some states are coming out now and saying that the executive order is in violation of their laws. These girls claim that they're in compliance with a lot of things because they have puberty blockers, these transgender athletes. So it's going to be a hotbed. We knew that there was going to be these challenges, and I don't think this is the last challenge, of course, but what they've done is they've jumped ahead of it and filed a lawsuit based on this executive order.
All right, moving over now to Ball versus White Sox. The former trainer from the White Sox it looks like this discrimination lawsuit has been restored now from what I'm reading. Preston, what do we have here?
Yeah, so this is a trainer that he was kind of there was some downsizing going on with the White Sox organization, and it looked like he was going to be let go, and he was claiming some age discrimination and things like that. And so the White Sox, they came to him and said, hey, we'll essentially pay you and buy you out. So they entered into an agreement, and the agreement basically said that he would be paid. Some of the terms were that he would be paid for a year of pay and for benefits. So he actually signed this agreement, and later down the road, he found out that through someone higher up in the White Sox organization that the reason that they were pushing to let him go was that he is gay. So in finding out, he says, "Whoa, hold the phone." So he filed a lawsuit against the White Sox organization, and the first defense that the White Sox came back to was basically saying that, oh, wait a minute, you already signed an agreement, and we're done here. This kind of covered everything that had you entered into a deal with us that addressed what you got paid. You accepted it, and you accepted the termination agreement. Well, he got kicked out of court. It was dismissed based on that. The lower court judge agreed with that and ruled that there was an agreement and that he couldn't proceed. Well, he appealed it, and the appellate judge basically said, no, I kind of agree with the trainer. His name's Ball. He agreed that, the validity of the termination agreement may have been procured by fraud, and that's a question of fact. And so dismissing at this time wasn't the right thing to do, saying that maybe he entered into this based on a number of reasons and based on pressure of, hey, I'm going to get fired anyway, and I might as well jump into this and take it. But he also pointed out an interesting thing that White Sox officials, they never refuted why he was actually let go, and they came back and said, well, we really don't need to say why. He entered into the agreement. It was a good faith agreement. It was an arm's length agreement. He accepted the money, accepted the benefits, and he was let go. So he's back in the game now, and we'll see what happens.
All right, moving over now. This is interesting. Georgia, Alabama, their NIL bills could face legal challenges because a couple of bills in those states to exempt college athletes' NIL income from state taxes. Now they're facing a little bit of pushback here, but this is something that I think could have ramifications following this, far-reaching beyond the states of Georgia and Alabama if this stuff is kind of pushed through. So what's the latest here? Give us an update.
Yeah, so there's no legal challenge to it yet, but they're pushing these bills, and essentially these bills, they would exempt college athletes from paying state taxes for income they earn from NIL money. And looking deep into it, the states of Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and other states, they don't have state income tax, and you've got these legislators that are big Crimson Tide fans and Georgia Bulldog fans, and they're going, oh, wait a minute. This might hurt us in our recruiting battles, because if you go to an athlete and say, hey, here's your NIL contract, here's the money you're going to make. Oh, and by the way, guess what? In our state, you don't even have to pay state income tax. So Georgia and Alabama are looking into this going, wow, we want to have something here that even though we have state income tax, that we cut out a little piece for these athletes. And our man Michael McCann, who does analysis, he says that there could potentially be a legal challenge, and the challenge would be based that non-college athletes who earn money in various ways, not through NIL, guess what? They have to pay state taxes. And so what they would claim is that this is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment in essentially applying laws, that aren't equal. You've got one participant here and one participant here, and they're not applied equally. So there could be some challenges. I don't know who would challenge it. There might be a student that's not an athlete come in and challenge us, say, hey, this isn't a fair fight, and I really don't care about Alabama or Georgia football. But it's interesting that, as you pointed out early, that the measures that are being taken, and especially because it's a complicated issue, and we know that Utah has enacted some certain things, not exactly on the issue of taxes, but on the issue of that these contracts aren't, public record.
Moving over to a story out of the world of pro football, the Arizona Cardinals have won a lawsuit that was brought by their former VP, Terry McDonough. So this was just ruled upon, I believe, today. Fill us in.
Yeah, so Terry McDonough was a high official VP of player personnel with the Cardinals, and he got into a little bit of a mess with some of the uppers, and he, and about some burner phones and things like that, and it looked like he was going to get let go, and so he made claims that he was being let go because of age discrimination and breach of contract and things like that. And the Cardinals, and I don't think they dispute this, they took kind of an aggressive position. They hired a PR firm, and the PR firm came out with what he alleges is some defaming comments about him, comments about his personal life, volatile demeanor, disturbing allegations of domestic violence, abandoned responsibility for his kids. And this was all kind of a PR thing, kind of coming at Terry McDonough. And so I think the interesting legal issue here is, and there's a couple of inconsistent things, that he actually did go to arbitration and got an award of $2.6 million, but the other part was his lawsuit was dismissed. And here's where it gets interesting, because we talked about this with Brian Flores, Gruden, all kinds of contracts that basically say, hey, if you're part of the NFL or part of the NBA, we have an agreement that these kind of disputes, they're not going to hit the courts. they got to be submitted to arbitration. That's just better for our organizations, and we see those a lot. And basically his claim was, and I think it's a pretty interesting claim, he's saying, wait a minute, but this is my claim against a PR firm, and they don't have privity of contract. They're not part of the contracts with the league, and they're the ones that brought it. But the judge kicked him out, and his daughter and wife both brought lawsuits, and he kicked them out, basically saying that these contracts, that these PR firms are agents of the organization, in this case the Arizona Cardinals, and that this protection extends to them. And so he kicked him out of court with that. So these arbitration agreements and these arbitration clauses, they're far-reaching, and he just saw that. He's kicked out of court. We'll see if he appeals.
All right, final one for today. And, you know, I hate to dispense any advice to burglars who potentially could be listening to the show today, but maybe don't post pictures of the things that you stole from the house that you stole them from. Joe Burrow's last week, picture surfaced of the guy who stole the merchandise from Joe Burrow's house. He posted pictures of himself online wearing Burrow's like jersey and his chain, I believe, his diamond chain. And now the burglars, in the case of both Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes situations, have done the same thing. And obviously, the feds are on the case. What can you tell us about this? It looks like it's becoming a trend and not a very smart one.
No, I think it is a trend. And I think what's interesting, as you mentioned, Joe Burrow, we talked about last week, and this week it comes out. This happened in October, but both Mahomes and Kelce, their homes were broken into in October. And what is happening is this Chilean ring of burglars, they are identifying when these athletes are going to be out of their homes. They know that they're going to be on the road at a game. And in both these cases, Mahomes and Kelce were out. Bobby Portis is also noted in this. And they're sophisticated in that way, and they're sophisticated in getting into these homes. But you know what they're not sophisticated in? Taking selfies and posting them, because there's a funny one here of and Garrett, who's looked at these, he says it's some of the same guys. And these guys are in Chiefs jerseys and T-shirts and holding stacks of watches and different things, and their smiles are pretty wide. So the feds, the FBI got a warrant, and now these guys have been arrested, illegal immigrants, and they've been charged with conspiracy to commit interstate transportation of stolen property, and they said in excess of $2 million in valuables.
Absolute morons. You know, my goodness gracious. All right, Preston, before I set you loose, on this Thursday, for any of our listeners who have any legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, Spence, we love coming on here with you and talking about these interesting legal issues in the world of sports, even numbskulls who are posting things on social media. But we'd love to hear from anyone out there and help you with your legal issues, especially if you have a personal injury case. Give us a call at 801-264-6677 or jump on our website at handylawutah.com.
Preston, thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend, and as always, go Utes.
Thanks, Spence. Go Utes.
All right. Preston Handy from the law firm of Handy and Handy. What is going through these idiots' numbskull, dull brain? Like, the one thing you just didn't need to do and you would have been able to get away with it is not post pictures of yourself online wearing Joe Burrow's chain or wearing Patrick Mahomes' jersey and his watch. Like, this is, look, I mean, let's start at the beginning. Rule number one, don't do that. Rule number one, don't steal from other people and don't burglarize homes. So let's just start there. And there's a period at the end of that sentence.
Yeah.
But if you decide to dabble and you want to get away with it, maybe don't post pictures of yourself online wearing the things that you stole from the famous people you stole them from.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like quite the smartest strategy, right? I think the picture one of them posted had Joe Burrow's jersey, and it had like the authentic official NFL game worn thing on it. Some of it was jewelry that was like custom jewelry, right? You're not going to find it in a store somewhere. It's made for a specific person. You're not going to be able to hide it. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your free time, but if you do decide to dabble in B&E, maybe don't take pictures.
The official stance of the show is to strongly encourage people to not do this.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
the official stance of the show.
Sorry.
But ultimately, as he said, if you are going to dabble in this potential new hobby, maybe don't do that. It kind of reminds me, it's a different situation. But remember during the draft process when there was a rumor like, hey, there's a video going around of Larry Tunsil, and he has a bong attached to his face through a gas mask. And Tunsil was like, it's totally not me. Because the initial video was just some dude in a gas mask hitting a bong. And Laramie Tunsil was like, it's not me. And then the second video came out, and the dude lifted up the mask, and it's entirely Laramie Tunsil.
It was
like, don't put a video online of you smoking a bong through a gas mask the week before you're getting drafted, dude. It's not that hard.
Wasn't it his dad, his jealous dad? Wasn't that the story?
Oh, really?
I think so.
I honestly don't remember who posted it. I just was laughing because he's like, it's not me. Because the first video was only a dude in a gas mask smoking a bong. And Tunsil and his reps are like, hey, it's not him. It's not me.
Yeah, I do remember that. But I think it came out later that the way it got out was someone in his family that was like not stoked that he was successful.
I don't know. I just know the next day the video came out of him removing the gas mask. And it's like, that's you, dude. And at that point, he's like, yeah, I guess it's me. And he still got drafted, and he's still awesome at football. But you know, all right. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Want to remind you that after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock, you will hear the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Bill Riley, Craig Smith talks some Utah basketball. Then after that, it is on. It is time now for the Four Nations face-off, the final game. Canada and the U.S. from Boston. The scenes are already getting crazy. You'll hear that after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. It starts at 6. We're going to join it in progress coming up at 7 o'clock. But the 5 o'clock hour of this radio program comes your way up next on this snowy Thursday afternoon. So keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time on this snowy and cold, chilly Thursday afternoon/evening. 5 o'clock hour of the program gets rolling right about now. Don't forget, we are 1 hour away from the Four Nations Face-Off Championship live in Boston. And we're also 1 hour away from the Craig Smith Coaches Show. So keep in mind, we will join the Four Nations Face-Off Championship in progress here on the station coming up at about 7 o'clock, but it will get going at 6 o'clock right after we say goodnight. But Craig Smith, Bill Riley, the Coaches Show for you, so stay tuned for that. 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by our good friends at Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASC certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism into every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance. From tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite. For over 3 decades, Burt Brothers doing it better since day one. More information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. All right, busy, lively show. A lot of topics on this Thursday afternoon. Going to bring in Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. The second half of the season for the Utah Jazz begins tomorrow night as they welcome in Oklahoma City. Second half of the season technically got going last night. It was a rescheduled game between the Lakers and the Hornets. The Lakers lost. Now 1-2 with both LeBron and Luka. They've lost back-to-back games, one to the Jazz here in Salt Lake, and the other to the Hornets last night. They've been getting smoked. It looks like Luka is going to sit tonight against Portland, but the Jazz in action. Of course, the piece of news that most people have been reacting to today is that Victor Wembanyama, the young rising global superstar, not just a superstar, global superstar for the San Antonio Spurs, has been shut down for the rest of the season over a blood clot, which is in his shoulder. Now, there is precedent here in pro basketball with other players suffering from blood clots. The first thought I had was Chris Bosh. Essentially, his career was over, ended by a blood clot. And, of course, we're all hoping, anybody who loves pro basketball, cares about pro basketball, hoping this young man will not have his trajectory derailed as a result of this situation. It ended Chris Bosh's career. Amin Thompson, last year in Detroit, his rookie year, had a blood clot issue. He's good now, and he's playing well, and he looks healthy. Brandon Ingram, probably most famously because he had a similar situation to Victor Wembanyama, also had a blood clot and had to be shut down, and he came back, and he's been fine. And this is a health thing. It's not a basketball thing. According to what I've read and heard today, when it comes to a blood clot like this, it has to be treated immediately, and as an athlete, you are shut down right away and not allowed to really start hitting it hard with the comeback and the physical therapy, whatever else it is, for an entire 6 months. So if you're the San Antonio Spurs, you're looking at potentially not even having Victor Wembanyama maybe for the start of next year. Now, I don't know that. I'm not reporting it because the Spurs are very confident that this is an isolated thing and not something that could cause long-term issues. But we'll have to see. Victor Wembanyama out for the rest of the year. He's been shut down. San Antonio right now, 23-29. So they're technically still in the mix. They're about 3.5, 4 games behind the Warriors and the Kings for the final play-in spot. But they're also now potentially in the mix to simply do what they've always done, and that is lose on purpose when there's a great player available. And they have tremendous amount of draft flexibility and draft capital moving forward. I would not be surprised if the San Antonio Spurs and R.C. Buford elect to do what they can to improve their lottery odds and maybe, who knows, have more lottery luck as they have 3 different times in their career as a pro basketball organization with David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and now Victor Wembanyama. Can you imagine if the Spurs on lottery night lucked into the number 1 pick and just added Cooper Flagg next to Victor Wembanyama? So that's the big news out of the world of pro basketball today. Of course, the Four Nations face-off tonight. U.S.-Canada round 2. Really excited for this game, excited to head home and watch it, and you guys can listen to it here on the station. U.S., with the U.S. win over Canada on Saturday of last week on the 15th, they ended a bunch of notable Canadian hockey win streaks. They had won 26 straight hockey games with Sidney Crosby in the lineup. They had won 13 straight games when it comes to playing against other NHL players. They had won 17 straight best-on-best games, and that's what tonight is. So we'll see how it goes down. Both Tkachuk brothers are going to play. Both of these teams have excellent goalies. Both of these teams have big-time motivation as far as wanting to get this done. Now, Saturday's game was in Montreal. Montreal, of course, has a 100-plus year hockey history. Boston, where the matchup will be tonight, is a excellent domestic hockey city. And by all accounts, this is one of the toughest tickets that we've seen in a long, long time. I'm not sure that we're going to see the same type of intensity and atmosphere in Boston as we did in Montreal. Neil Smith joined the program yesterday and gave us a good breakdown of what to expect tonight. But the ticket situation is this. According to Vivid Seats, the average listed ticket price for the Four Nations Face-Off Championship game has skyrocketed by 137% since the game was played last Saturday, U.S.-Canada on February the 15th. The average ticket price for this game tonight on that day prior to the game was $990. The average ticket price for the game tonight now is $2,400. So a massive jump. PK Subban was reporting earlier on ESPN that a lot of his peers in the NHL, like current NHL players, have reached out through reps to try to get a ticket to the game, and they've been turned away. So this should be a lot of fun. There's not a ton going on tonight. There's a little bit of NBA action. There's some college basketball as well. Jazz in action tomorrow. No real local teams in college basketball action tonight. I would imagine this is going to pull a big number, maybe even close to 10 million people. It's interesting to hear how the coverage has been handled by media members that don't talk about hockey a ton. But I thought PK Subban today gave a really interesting diatribe, and certainly PK was taking advantage of his platform to probably pull off a little bit of performance art to motivate people to continue to watch hockey. I mean, this has been a real boom for this sport, and it's kind of fun that we're actually a hockey town with the Utah Hockey Club here. And so PK Subban, it's online, it's everywhere, really did an interesting job breaking down the dichotomy between NBA players and NHL players, and to utilize this opportunity to basically speak to consumers and say, as I'm paraphrasing here, if you want to watch a sport, if you want to watch a game, if you want to watch a situation where a league actually employs players that care to show up on time for work and play hard, watch NHL hockey, because these guys do. They show up, they play through injuries, and we've heard Brendan Haig, we've heard a lot of these players talk about playing for your flag and not playing for the camera and caring about both club and country. It's a little soccer that way. But these guys tonight showing up and playing with passion, playing hard, and playing for, as cliche as it sounds, what's on the front of the chest, not the name on the back of the sweater, right? Playing for your country, playing for the flag, playing for pride, and not wanting to lose to those dudes. I do not anticipate that we will see a bunch of fights right out of the gates. I don't think that's going to be the case. And typically in pro hockey, like a Stanley Cup final or a Stanley Cup playoff game 7 or what have you, you don't see a lot of fights when there's a lot on the line. Simply put, you can't have your best players sitting in the penalty box. And the Tkachuk brothers are too good to be sitting outside of the action. They need to be involved. And that's why most hockey teams have enforcers that aren't very good at hockey. Quite frankly, if I could be a little harsh, like Spicy Tuna, our guy, Liam O'Brien, was he a fourth-string forward? And he's brought on basically to throw hands? Because you don't want Dylan Gunther or Clayton Keller sitting in the penalty box, but you're okay if our guy Spicy Tuna is chilling over there for a few minutes. So Connor Hellebuck is the goalie for the Team USA, and right now he might be the best goalie in the world. And there's a lot of information out there that indicates maybe if there is a fight, like is Connor going to challenge Jordan Binnington, the polarizing figure who is the goalie for the World Canada team, as they call them. Now, Jordan has interesting experience in Boston. In 2019, he was the goalie for the St. Louis Blues, and they went up to Boston and played a Game 7 and won, and Jordan was amazing. And he has experience with this club, he has experience with this city. He has experience playing hockey in Boston in front of crazy fans. And we have the pregame coverage pulled up on the television in the studio, and they are showing the fans outside of the stadium in Boston. It looks like it is going to be wild. Looks like it's going to be intense, and you will watch a game tonight with players who seem to care, as opposed to what we've seen from NBA basketball, not just in the All-Star weekend situation, but throughout the course of most of the regular season. And it's not entirely fair to put all this on the players. But it was interesting the way PK Subban decided to handle his opportunity today. It's pretty rare that on, the ESPN shows like Get Up, First Take, whatever it is, that they delve into hockey storylines unless there's absolutely nothing else going on. It was like in the A block for SportsCenter and like the B block for some of the big-time ESPN, products, the shows they run throughout the course of the morning to get you ready for the world in sports and talk about things topically. And everybody was talking about the Four Nations face-off. So the championship game will be tonight. Again, it starts at 6 o'clock, and we will join it in progress at 7 o'clock after the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Real quick, I found this interesting, and we brought it up a little bit earlier because, of course, the college football landscape in this market is something where people are always interested in college football storylines. Well, Texas and USC have joined Nebraska in canceling their spring games. So Steve Sarkisian, who just signed a new deal, by the way, indicated that this is a time that he is now going to utilize to make sure his players stay healthy. I just have to wonder, Texas, USC, Nebraska, no spring games, I have to wonder whether or not this is going to turn into a thing, because if we call it how it is, the spring game now at the University of Utah is simply an exhibition, and a lot of the better players don't play. And look, I get it. I'm not pushing back on it. And certainly if you're Coach Witt, if you're the University of Utah, the past couple of years have led to a lot of PTSD when it comes to the health of your roster. So if you want to take a break from the spring game as a result of wanting your players to be right for the season, I'm not sure anybody would have a big issue with it. Obviously, it's a bummer if it goes away because it's just simply fun to topically have something to discuss in the spring as we're all looking ahead to the fall when college football gets real. But Florida State also canceled its spring game this year. Now, that was because of renovations to Doak Campbell. But Mike Norvell has indicated he doesn't think it's coming back at all. So Texas, USC, Nebraska, Florida State, all canceling their spring games in the world of college football. All right, the second half of the season for the Utah Jazz gets rolling tomorrow with OKC in town. We'll do a little Jazz and a little RSO with Andy Larson. Coming up on the other side, and Andy was also in Provo to see BYU dismantle Kansas, so we'll get to some of that as well. And then it's time for the Craig Smith Coaches Show, then the Four Nations Face-Off Final. It's a big Thursday on this radio station, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we got the Craig Smith Coaches Show. Coming up on the other side of a quick break, it's the final segment of the show for this Thursday. You'll hear from Bill Riley, Craig Smith, talk a little Utah men's basketball. It's been a positive stretch for the Utes. They've played well. Couple of wins over the Kansas teams. Still blows my mind that the Kansas Jayhawks rolled into the state of Utah and took 2 L's and never led. Didn't lead the Utes for a minute, didn't lead the Utes for a second, nor did they lead the Cougars for any portion of that game. The Utes are back on the road coming up on the 23rd at UCF. And then a big one at McHale at Arizona. A couple of home games, Arizona State and West Virginia. And then they'll finish it up down in Provo. BYU's going to have revenge on the mind after the Utes got them up here. If the Utes can finish 3-2 in their final 5 games, that is a 10-win conference season. And maybe the Big 12 isn't what we thought it would be. I mean, clearly the SEC is the best conference in college basketball. And then Big 10 right behind it. ACC is down. The Big 12 is probably the 3rd best conference in college basketball this year. They have an elite national championship contender in the Houston Cougars. And then maybe a secondary threat in Arizona. Iowa State, Texas Tech, 2 solid teams. Ken Pom likes them. Had Ken Pom in studio. So Utes back in action. We'll hear what Craig Smith has to say about his team coming up with the Craig Smith Coaches Show. And then just a reminder, following that, we will join the Four Nations Face-Off Final in progress between Canada and the United States. The Utah Jazz are off tonight. They're back in action tomorrow as they'll continue the second half of the season. Turner Sports has your double dip if you're looking for NBA basketball tonight. First game is going on right now between the Celtics and the 76ers. And then your late night game-ish, around 7:30, 8 o'clock, is the Suns and the Spurs. But speaking of the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama shut down for the season. A blood clot in his shoulder was found after he returned from All-Star Weekend in San Francisco. Now, we have precedent here. My first thought was Chris Bosh. Obviously, you guys remember blood clots shut down Chris Bosh and his career. Brandon Ingram, Almond Thompson, other players have dealt with this. And if you can get at it early, it's pretty treatable. And hopefully Victor Wembanyama gets back on track pretty quickly here. I'm told, based off of what I've read, I should say, blood clot means you shut it down right away. 6 months, you're basically on the shelf before you can really start getting back at it. So what does that mean for the rest of the season? I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, San Antonio is not that far out of the lottery when it comes to the top end of the lottery. So could they get another bit of lottery luck and add a good piece next to Victor Wembanyama? All right, Porter, before we say goodnight, am I reading that Zach Martin is retiring from the
Correct.
NFL? Oh, wow.
Yes.
You know what? I don't blame him.
No.
Like, you might as well. But
Yeah.
hell of a player. I mean, one of the best offensive linemen of all time.
I mean, you spend a decade in the league. I know that's not like seen as a super long career based on some of the things that we see athletes doing around the world, but playing 9 years as one of the top offensive linemen in the league and playing 9 years where you don't miss a lot of snaps, that's a full career and then some. Although, again, a lot of people sometimes nowadays expect things like LeBron and the type of like long careers that we see from some guys are total outliers. The average NFL career is like 2.5 years, I think.
Well, and offensive linemen don't play longer than a decade more often than not.
Right.
And Zach Martin, 9-time Pro Bowl selection in 11 years. Wow. The only Bob Lilly, Larry Allen, and Jason Witten have more Pro Bowl selections in the history of the Dallas Cowboys. So pretty impressive there. All right, Porter, before we get out of here, it is time now for the Craig Smith Coaches Show, then the Four Nations Championship matchup between Canada and the U.S. What comes our way on a Friday edition of the radio show?
On a Friday edition of The Drive, we'll cover all of our bases, starting it off with a little RSL, some preseason stuff, some CONCACAF chat with Kurt Schmid of Real Salt Lake. Howard Beck stops by of The Ringer for the NBA Daily Assist. We'll talk some running Utes with Sean Mooney, some PGA Tour with Paul Pugmire, and then working on hopefully a Utah Hockey Club player or front office member is the plan to recap some hockey. If I can't get one of those guys, maybe we'll just start reaching out to some NHL media type folks. But someone to talk. 4 nations face-off final.
I've got U.S. 4, Canada 3.
Whoa, high scoring.
What do you got?
I've got I haven't even thought about it.
Well, just throw something. Nobody knows. Just throw something out there.
I'm going 3-1 USA.
See, you just did copious amounts of research. 3-1 U.S.
Yeah.
I'll take 4-3 U.S.
Let's do it.
All right, Craig Smith Coaches Show coming up next. Special thank you today to Andy Larson, Ken Pomeroy, and Amin El-Hassan for any of the sound that you potentially may miss from the show today. You can go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. That ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store for free. And then for what we do specifically every afternoon for 4 hours, our podcast page is called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and it's available wherever you get your shows. So please subscribe, rate, and review our show. If you say nice things in the comments and give us all the stars, it really helps. If you like what we do, please do that tonight. For Porter, I'm Spence saying, and I enjoy your Thursday evening. Craig Smith's Coaches Show coming up on the other side. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on ESPN 700, 92 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio.